Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the Sibling Rivalry podcast, the brother sister combo where we talk about politics, culture, and all things aligned. Super excited to be bringing the story to you. Me and my brother are pretty hype about these deportation and all the stories surrounding it. So my brother's going to give a little intro as to what we're going to be talking about today.
All right, so yeah, this story came out a couple of weeks ago with the famous case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia being initially mistakenly deported, as reported by the Trump administration, and then after a few court battles, we're kind of at a standstill where the Trump administration does not want to bring him back. While because even though every single court has said that they need to facilitate, that's the specific word, facilitate Abrego's bring back to the United States. So we're going to kind of talk about that case and also just kind of be focusing on the Trump administration's deportations overall. We did hit the 100-day mark of Trump being in office for a second term. So towards the end, we're just going to be giving our feelings about how we feel about Trump's first days in office. So the video that we have pulled up for you is a Piers Morgan panel involving two conservatives. You can probably see on the screen that one of them is Dinesh D'Souza. We also have Jack Posobiec on the panel, and then two other left-leaning folks. I know one of them is Kim Iverson, which I've never heard of, and then another Democratic operative that worked on the Harris campaign. I don't know why I just went through that because he's just going to say it in the video. But I guess just initial feelings. Sis, how are you feeling about this court case or Trump's deportations in general?
Well, as you know, I'm a big supporter of Trump and everything that he's trying to do. So I feel pretty good about it. I think Trump is doing exactly what he's promised that he was going to do. So that feels pretty good to have a politician actually do what they say they're going to do. Um, I think that there's a lot of fear mongering around what Trump is doing in the media. I'm not too upset with the pushback that the Trump administration is getting from the Democrats, more so, just because I think that's how, democratic societies work, even though, we're a republic, but we're a democratic republic. So I think it's good to get pushback, just to catch any mistakes or to check the other side, to keep everyone in check. That's the whole point of our checks and balances. So, but ultimately, I think I'm pretty happy with what he's doing. So,
Okay, and as the premise of the show goes, I'm pretty unhappy with what Trump's doing. I mean, he got elected in office for all the immigration that was going on in America, and not only the Biden administration, but also a lot of it happened under the Trump administration the first time around as well. So he ran on that platform. He got elected to do it. So as far as him going out with that, like I don't have too many issues with it. If someone is here illegally, it makes sense to deport him. But I think as far as like the criticism that he's getting, it's just that the way that he's going about it. We've had these famous stories. This one included of people being deported. People have been deported mistakenly or unjustifiably. Seems that most people do agree that if someone's here illegally and they're a criminal in this country, that they should be deported. I don't think you're going to find a lot of controversy around that. But now we're kind of seeing this issue of like who it is that Trump is labeling as a criminal. Kilmar, Abrego, Garcia being the most controversial out of all of them. So we're going to get into this Piers Morgan video. I'm sure we're going to find plenty of opportunities to kind of jump in and talk about it. But let's just get into it. You have the video up, right?
yes.
Okay, all right, let's go.
Millions of people who have broken the law and come here illegally. I think that Trump has a referendum or a mandate to send the illegals who are here back home.
So I'm all about it. Get rid of all the illegals, sure. Let's not use terrorism in order to get rid of all of our constitutional rights, due process. We need to keep all of that in place. That is what makes America America.
Please make illegal aliens and support for MS-13 Mike, please go tell all your buddies on the Democrat side. I would love for you to make this your argument going in that we need more illegal aliens in the country.
Like, you are one of the internet's biggest conspiracy theorists, and I'm very glad to be on this panel with you so I can just call you out for that. But like everything
How
that
was
you
your
say has
How
to
was
be
your Kamala
shiny
Harris
massive
campaign last year? How did that go? Did that go as well as your weight loss, Mike? He was a wife beater in addition to this information that he was a member of MS-13, and people will sit there blue in the face and say, "Oh, he was this innocent guy. He was just working." It's simply not true.
A year ago, President Trump told Time magazine in vivid detail about his plan to deport 15 million illegal immigrants. He spoke about mass deportations more than 100 times as a candidate, and the American people voted for Donald Trump. But when the wheels hit the runway, it gets complicated. There are laws, there are mistakes, and there is compassion. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was deported to El Salvador by mistake. The government has admitted that. The Supreme Court says that was illegal. Border Chief Tom Homan says that we should have no compassion because of this.
Every time I read a story about this, it's Maryland father, Maryland father. They don't mention he's a member of MS-13, who is a designated terrorist group, one of the most violent gangs in the world. They don't mention he's an MS-13 member. They don't mention he's an El Salvadoran citizen being held by the country of El Salvador.
Well, the problem is we've not yet been shown the hard evidence that Garcia was or is a member of MS-13. That remains inconclusive. What we do know is a 2019 court order even blocked his deportation over concerns for his safety. Well, Trump's team says the Supreme Court's order to facilitate his return only means they should let him back in to face due process if El Salvador agrees. And the president of El Salvador does not agree.
The question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
So you could release him inside El Salvador?
Yeah, but I'm not releasing, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. Well, that was...
All right, so I think, this is kind of where I want to jump in. So, just to kind of get into a little bit more of my thoughts, I think the issue with this specific case is that there's all this like gray about like, is this specific guy a member of MS-13? And as far as I know, after looking into it, that there's no legal basis for saying that he's a member of MS-13. And it's not only that he was deported back to El Salvador. That would be its own thing, but it wouldn't be as bad as this case, where not only was he sent back to El Salvador, that he's currently in prison in El Salvador. Now, as far as I know, he doesn't have a criminal history in the United States. I don't know if he has a criminal history in El Salvador, but if he doesn't, then he shouldn't be in prison whatsoever. So this is kind of my issues, that like this guy's due process rights have seemed to be thoroughly violated, and the person that mistakenly, as they said it initially, was sent to El Salvador, but they don't seem to be interested in trying to fix that issue whatsoever.
Well, I would be curious what legal basis you researched that would be required to determine if he's an MS-13 gang member. And then I'm not really concerned with the due process of it all, because as far as I'm concerned, he was an illegal immigrant. He was an illegal alien. He crossed over the border illegally. And so at the end of the day, that's what matters most. He was sent back to his country of origin. And so it's now up to El Salvador to determine due process based on their legal standards, and what they do with their own citizens is not really a concern of the U.S.
So when it comes to, he did come to the country illegally in 2011, but in 2019 he had a withholding order to be deported back to his country of origin. And as far as I know, he was checking with ICE from 2019 all the way up until 2025, and they did not make any, they did not process any sort of deportation order for him. So as far as I understand, he was illegal from 2011 to 2019, but from 2019 up until now, it seems to me that he had some sort of like asylum claim for him to stay in the country. So up until when he was deported, I don't think he was an illegal citizen. He just had like a a withholding order to not be deported back to El Salvador. So if they deported him somewhere else,
Right.
that'd be one thing. But as far as like the courts is concerned, the one place he was not supposed to be deported to was the place that he was deported to.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, he had a deportation order from 2019, and then later on there was a withholding order that was put out by one of these judges for him not to be sent back to El Salvador based on concerns of, retribution or retaliation from gang members. Um, so elaborate, because
So
that's what
my
I had heard.
So my understanding, and I mean, I was just kind of running this through Chat GPT, and they did give me a timeline. So from 2011 to 2019, Kilmar Garcia is in the country illegally. He came in as a teenager when he was 16, and in 2019, that's when the withholding of removal order got placed. I think that was when, the story where they found him outside that Home Depot among with like those four other like guys.
Yes, the alleged gang members he was with outside of Home Depot.
I think that is when, and I can just look it up really quick, but I think that was when he was initially like caught up with any sort of law enforcement. Was that point? There was a lot of the cops who brought him in thought he was a part of the gang, and I think at that point they were trying to deport him in 2019. But then that's when he went to file an asylum claim to not be deported back to El Salvador. Now there was a bunch of like legal like determinations. Like, let me share my screen really quick in the Discord because I have the document up. Because technically his asylum claim was denied. Because I think the main reason why it got denied was because he just filed it way too late. Because I think you have a year to file asylum when you come to the country legally. I could be wrong about that, but this is other specific order. This is the withholding of removal order that got approved because when he testified in front of the judge, his concerns of being deported back to El Salvador, they found that to be credible enough for him to not be sent back to that specific country for because they believed but like they thought it was credible enough that he would be targeted by a gang if he was sent back to El Salvador. So I think specifically his asylum claim was denied, but that withholding order got approved because of those claims. And the people who were trying to deport him, my understanding is that they didn't have enough credible evidence for him to say that he was a part of a gang for them to deport him.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, if I go down to the document, so specifically here in the document, it says the respondent's application for asylum is denied. So let me just make sure. Yeah, so the respondent's application for asylum is denied, but the respondent's application for withholding of removal was granted, and there's another one in here for Convention Against Torture, which was also denied. I just think they didn't find it specifically fell under whatever they define as torture, as far as like when it comes to like asylum claims or like immigration or something like that. So as far as like
right, and so
go ahead.
Well, that I was just gonna say, and so that's where this like quote unquote mistake has occurred, where they weren't supposed to deport him back to El Salvador, which is like, yeah, that is a mistake. But as far as like bringing him back, it just seems like it's not really pragmatic to do so. You know, I won't really say it's unfortunate that they sent him back to El Salvador, but it was a mistake. But in terms of like going forward, I don't really see the necessity in continuing to harp on the fact that we need to spend resources to bring him back. Now, if the president of El Salvador did want to do that, then of course the Trump administration would be required to facilitate that based on the Supreme Court's ruling. But as far as I'm concerned, that's up to the president of El Salvador. So it's again like a drum that I don't understand why it continues to be beaten.
Well, but I think the drum is being beat on this for two reasons. For one, if a country like if if Garcia, let's say from 2011 2018, yeah, he's here illegally, but from that point, the court said that like, yeah, you're good to stay here. We're not going to deport you back to El Salvador, and he has been checking with ICE since then, and they didn't find
I
any
mean,
reason
it's
to.
not good to stay here. It's just that he couldn't be sent back to El Salvador.
Well, they
Like
didn't deport him. Well, they didn't deport him
either way he
anywhere
would have.
else.
Yeah, the Trump administration didn't, but they could have deported him anywhere else. So it's not like he was allowed to stay here. It's just that he wasn't allowed to be sent back to El Salvador
But why didn't they deport him all this time?
because it was under the Biden administration.
Well, I mean, 2020, but I guess you could say COVID and all that stuff. But it might, but still, like it doesn't really change how I'm feeling about it. Like, if he's gone through the court system all this time, and then suddenly 2020, the thing that's keeping you, I'll say the thing that's keeping you from being deported back to El Salvador, that the administration just kind of throws that out the window and deports him back there. And again, they didn't just deport him back, but they deported him back for saying that he had gang membership when that has not been clarified through the courts. And two, he's not just deported back; he's in prison back in El Salvador. Now again, like El Salvador, yeah, it's a different country. They run it. They run the country how they want. But it does seem like the United States and El Salvador has this kind of like deal or this like relationship where we're specifically sending, illegal immigrants that are criminals here in this country to be stayed at this like prison in El Salvador. So I mean, as far as like why the United States has incentive to bring him back is because one, it seems like Kilmar Abrego Garcia got sent as a part of this deal that United States has with El Salvador. So we made a mistake. I think that we do have an onus to try to bring him back. Now, as far as like if El Salvador is going to send him back, then okay, yeah, I guess there's not much. But my understanding is that the Trump administration has done very little to try to facilitate his return. It kind of sounds like
They're trying to effectuate his return. So I don't really see a problem with Trump not going out of his way to try to expend resources to bring back an illegal alien just to send him off somewhere else, which would not be his country of origin. And like they could literally send him anywhere else. So I don't see why that is really an issue. Like again, they made a mistake. It's a mark. It's a negative mark on Trump's record. But it's kind of like too little, too late.
Well, it's not too little, too. I mean, it just depends on like what he's gone through. Like, let's say Trump could do a multitude of different things, right? And he's gone through every single thing to try to bring him back. Yeah, if he can't get him back, then I mean that's one thing. I don't know legally what the United States could do, but like I mean, I'm not convinced that Trump is taking as like every single avenue you can to try to bring this guy back, because it's not bringing him back for him just to stay here. It's to bring him back so he can go through the court system properly, get his day in court. Yeah, if he turns out to be like an illegal gang member, or if it turns out that he just needs to get deported somewhere else, then yeah, go ahead and just do that. But again, like the argument for him doing it is because you violated his rights. That's the argument.
Well, he violated our laws by coming in here illegally and spending almost 8 years here without going through the legal process.
Mm-hmm.
And then he jumps into the asylum process because he got caught up with the cops, with supposed gang members, with drug paraphernalia, with tattoos that are associated with MS-13. So there is some evidence to support the MS-13 claim. I know it hasn't been argued out in court, which is really at the responsibility of the judge to kind of bring that court case, which they clearly can't do because Abrego is not here. And so again, it's just like, why are we going to continue to expend resources? Like the Trump administration has quite a bit on their plate that they're having to deal with. I don't really see a problem in them not expending energy to try to get back this illegal alien to go through this court process just to have him deported elsewhere,
Because
or to
that's the process that we follow. If like you can't violate
for
someone's due
United
process.
States citizens. For United States citizens, due process looks a lot different for illegal aliens, especially yeah, illegal aliens, ones who came over here illegally. The due process is not going to be the same as you would have for an American citizen.
Oh, I agree with that, but like it doesn't sound like any kind of process was followed here.
Well, there
Well,
was a process
sorry.
that was
To be specific, they didn't follow the necessary process that you follow when it comes to an illegal immigrant.
well, they did by deporting him. They didn't follow the withholding order to not have him sent back to El Salvador. Now, what their claim is that he is an illegal alien criminal, and that's kind of where the process is broken down. Is what there hasn't been like concrete documentation or evidence fought and borne out in the court process to actually validate that claim.
Yeah, but that. I mean, that's the brunt of it all. It's like if the Trump, because the Trump administration has like hung their hat that this guy is a part of MS-13. Like I haven't really heard much. Maybe I've missed it. I haven't heard much. Just them saying like, oh yeah, he's just an illegal immigrant, so he got deported. No, they've been beating the drum, saying like, no, this guy is a part of this dangerous gang. He's a part of a terrorist organization. So we don't want to bring him back. Like why is everyone asking for this guy to be brought back? And obviously there's some people who are saying, and I think like the Maryland man story of like everyone calling him like a Maryland father. Like yeah, it kind of does like go into that where I think people are kind of bearing the lead about like what exactly he's accused of being, but like I think the root of the argument, and I think this is a pretty valid thing, that like if you admit initially that you deported someone mistakenly, and then every court that has looked at it since this has been going in the courts for the last like month or so, that they've said like, yeah, you violate due process rights, you should bring him back so you can put him through the process. That's I think that's what the Trump administration needs to do, and the fact that they seem both reluctant and unwilling to do it I just think that's gross.
Well, I just think it speaks to what they need to do going forward. I don't think we need to harp on the past and harp on the mistakes that were made, because I just think, again, it's very unpragmatic to bring back an illegal alien just to expend resources to have him deported to another country. Like it was a mistake. Don't do it going forward. But
it's a current mistake. He's still in jail in El
well, there's
Salvador.
not much to be done about it if the El Salvadorian president won't allow his release.
I'm not even convinced by that. I'm sure if Trump told him, "Hey, bring him back," El Salvador would just ship him back. It's not you're not asking.
Yeah, but I don't really care. Yeah, maybe, but I don't really care for him to do that.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. We're gonna do the thing. We're gonna go off a tangent. I think they get into this in the video, so we'll just continue.
All right.
Pretty crystal clear. So Garcia is probably a moot point, certainly as far as the Trump administration is concerned. But there's going to be a lot more. Trump won the argument about the US border, and he's fixed the crisis at lightning speed. He doesn't get enough credit for that, in my opinion. And that's partly because we're debating every individual who's been caught up in the vast deportation net. The American people voted for kicking out criminals, but did they vote for kicking out rumoured gang members without clear, concrete evidence produced, or gay makeup artists who may have been deported by mistake? Well, let's find out. I'm joined now by Jack Posobiec. He's the senior editor at Human Events. The Democrat strategist and former Kamala Harris advisor, Mike Nellis. Dinesh D'Souza, the conservative filmmaker and host of the Dinesh D'Souza podcast. And on her uncensored debut, Kim Iversen, the host of the Kim Iversen Show. Well, welcome to all of you. Mike Nellis, let's start first of all with Kilmar Garcia. What's your assessment of it?
Yeah, my take on this is that, look, the American people voted for stronger border security. They voted to get dangerous criminals, violent criminals out of this country. I accept that. I also want that. What I don't think the American people voted for is getting rid of due process. The way you determine whether somebody is a criminal in this country is through the judicial system. You have to go through that process, and there are processes that are set up to remove people like Kilmar or anybody else. The federal government has produced no evidence that Kilmar is a danger. He was doing everything that he was supposed
So I'm gonna pause it here. It's just again, like I think it's a bit disingenuous to say that they've provided no evidence. It's just that that evidence hasn't been borne out in the court process. So they have provided some evidence as to his affiliation with MS-13, for example, the tattoos on his fingers, the police, the police case or interaction that was had, I believe, in 2019 or a year prior, where he was found with other alleged MS-13 gang members. He had drug paraphernalia on him. He had marijuana on him. He had a wad of money on him with typical uh, signs of gang membership, with the eyes and the mouth blacked out on the president's, which is associated with MS-13 gang membership. So there has been evidence provided by the Trump administration as to his affiliation with MS-13. It just hasn't been borne out in the court process.
Yeah, and I've heard of the same evidence, and I mean, when I heard the evidence too, it's like, okay, like that does not look good. I mean, the finger tattoos, not really, but I'm more like interested in I think it's like what do you say, the anonymous like person who said that he was a part of MS-13, and then also like that initial, like I think it was like 2019 where like they did find like all these different like illicit materials that pointed to like gang membership, and like, so yeah, all that's fine, but again, like that evidence has not been properly rooted through a court process. So to me, it's like, because as officially on the books, as far as I know, he doesn't have any type of like criminal record. Like he hasn't been convicted or found guilty of anything within the U.S. system, and I think like, so like I do think Democrats have like this kind of, what do you say, this kind of habit to kind of like downplay what could be legitimate evidence for him being a part of this gang membership. But to me, it's just going to boil down to the due process. Like if this was all adjudicated in a court and they said, oh yeah, like it looks like, if it was formally said like, oh yeah, it looks like you are a part of this gang, you're going to get deported, this guy wouldn't have been talked about. It's like, yeah, he was found to be in this gang, or likely to be in this gang, so he got deported for that reason. So it's always just going to go down to the Trump administration just did not follow the correct process to ship him to deport him.
To deport him to the prison in El Salvador. They had the right to deport him.
Yeah, just not to El Salvador, but that's the whole point. He's literally in El Salvador right now, in prison.
I'm just wanting us to be clear, because that's also something that keeps being said. They didn't have the right to deport him. Yes, they did. They just based on the withholding order, they weren't allowed to send him back to El Salvador, and especially not back to the prison in El Salvador. Which, I mean, yeah, send him back to the prison.
And it's fine being specific. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure if a president has the right to deport people to other countries besides their origin. I don't know if they can do that. Can they?
Which is, well, based on the withholding order, that's what is being argued. So I don't know, but that's why to me it would seem like, okay, they sent him back to his country of origin. I don't really see the problem, but the problem is the withholding order. So he has to be deported because he came here illegally. His asylum claim was denied, so they would have had to deport him to another country, is what it seems like. Whether there's a law that forbids that, I don't know. But then that kind of begs the question, well, then why can't they send him back to El Salvador?
Well, because for El Salvador specifically, is because, yeah, his asylum claim was denied, but the withholding order of removal to El Salvador, that was granted. So as far as like what's on the books for this guy, I mean, as far as like legally what's on the books, I mean, you have like I think you have like a police stop in 22, you have the initial police stop, and I think it was arrest in 19, you have the withholding order, and you have like the restraining order by his wife that she initially put in, but it never went through finally. I mean, that's as far as like what we know about Abrego in the courts. But as far as like his deportation status, the only thing I can see is that he had a withholding order where he couldn't be sent back to that specific country. I don't know if he could have been sent anywhere else. I think that would have caused some other issues, but
Right.
I think it's
Then
good
we
to
would have had to keep him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you know, and that would, you know, that'd be a different story to talk about. But I think just specifically in this one is that the one thing that said he can't be deported to El Salvador, the Trump administration just ignored that and deported them there anyway.
Based on their own founded evidence of MS-13 gang membership affiliation, which is part of the controversy because that hasn't been borne out in court.
Mm-hmm.
Supposed to do
All
everything
right.
the federal government was telling him to do. He was following the instructions he was given by ICE. The only evidence the conservative movement that the Trump administration has made is that he owns a Bulls hat. And if we're going to start throwing away people and locking them up because they have Bulls hats, we have a lot bigger problems in this country than people coming across the border. And look, I would put it this way: we have Dinesh on the panel today. Like Dinesh, like you are someone I have profound disagreements with. I'm sure we're going to get into some of those today. You were born in India, and you're here legally. I want you here. I support your right to free speech. But if we start throwing people like you out of the country with the Democratic president, like that's not right either, and I don't want that. And I want to make sure that people have access to due process. So they've got to show that Kilmar is a dangerous criminal, which I don't think they can do because otherwise they would have already done it. Otherwise, we need to bring this guy home. That's what the Supreme.
Okay, key differences. Dinesh came here legally, Kilmar did not. And so there's just a complete difference in the due process that's going to be allowed to someone who came here legally versus someone who came here illegally, which is why I think most people who support Trump's policies, especially the immigration policies, it's just not the hill to die on. Because either way, he was here illegally for like 8 years before he even went through the asylum process, simply because he got picked up by the police, so he had to, if he wanted to stay. So it's just like, you know, just a difference there. Like, there's a difference between how America is going to treat legal immigrants compared to illegal immigrants.
Yeah, and Dinesh is going to point out the same thing you just said in a little bit. And yeah, I mean, like, ultimately, like, yeah, I do agree with you that, like, I'm sure American citizens have different, like, due process rights than illegal immigrants. Like, they're like the barrier for someone to go to jail if as an American citizen is going to be different than the barrier to deport somebody. So, like, those differences clear. I would even agree with them up to a certain point. It just even seems like the process rights that a legal immigrant has, that wasn't followed in this case either. So the comparison to American citizens, I'm not too interested in. If the Democrats or the left people on the left here make that comparison, I think it's not really a good comparison. And I think the main thing that gets muddied up that the left is doing is that they're focusing on, like, hey, we wouldn't treat American citizens like this. Hey, we wouldn't, you know, that, like, the Trump administration, like, has, like, all this kind of, like, loosey-goosey evidence, which some of it I think it is loosey-goosey. Some of it I think is actually kind of legitimate. But I don't think it's necessarily the money the issue. There's a process that we follow to deport people. Trump administration did not follow that process. 3 different courts have said that he did not follow that process. Even the Supreme Court in a 9-0 decision said that they did violate his due process rights and they should bring him back. And the Trump administration is not doing
No,
it.
not that they should bring him back, that they should facilitate bringing him back.
But now you have to define what facilitate means.
No, actually, they have to define, which the Supreme Court has put the onus on the judge who brought this case, that they have to define effectuating bringing him back. So that's where it's kind of fallen by the wayside, is that judge, from my understanding, still hasn't provided any explanation as to how to effectuate that bringing him back. And so that's really on the judge to bring that explanation for then the Trump administration to now act, which from my understanding, that judge has not provided the explanation on effectuating that, because anything he says is likely going to be shut down in court, because it will likely it'll likely fall into the area of foreign policy, which is at the discretion of the executive branch. The judicial branch cannot impede on anything regarding foreign policy, which is why they haven't spoken on effectuating that. From my understanding, they haven't done that so far.
Yeah, I know the judge was talking to a few of the Trump administration's lawyer. It was recent. I can't remember exactly, but I think from what I remember, is that I think the mainly is the judge was asking what has the Trump administration done up until this point to facilitate or effectuate his return. Let me see. Go ahead and start the video. I'm just reading something really quick.
Supreme Court has ruled, and every day that Trump is not listening to the Supreme Court, we're in the middle of a constitutional crisis.
Okay, well, let's go to Dinesh for a response to that.
Well, let's look at the differences between me and Kilmar. For one, I came to the country legally as an exchange student. I then became a foreign student and went to Dartmouth. Then I went through a process of getting a green card legally to work. I went through 5 years of naturalization. So I came to the country in 1978. I only became a citizen in 1991. This guy, Kilmar, came to the country illegally. So start right there. This was a guy who sneaked into the country in violation of law. That alone makes him a criminal. Now, the question is, what do we do about people like Kilmar? The accomplishment, Pierre, as you noted, Trump has sealed the borders, so it's difficult for new Kilmars to sneak across. But we still have millions of people who are flagrantly and deliberately allowed in by Biden, and just millions of illegals in the country. Does Trump have the right to send those people home? That's the first question we have to ask. Now, an immigration judge admittedly looked at this case and said, yes, I kind of accept that this guy was a gang member based upon an identification apparently by someone in the gang. Note also that the judge said about Kilmar, if he goes back to El Salvador, he will be in danger of being killed by a rival gang. That alone implies that the guy himself was a gang member. Why would a rival gang target him if he wasn't himself in a gang? So the Trump administration has made this determination based upon the facts of the case. They've sent him to his native country, El Salvador. He's a citizen of El Salvador. It's the job of the Salvadoran government to decide what to do about his gang membership or his criminal status. That is not really our concern. So I do see these.
So just really quick, I think Dinesh kind of does this a lot in this video, which kind of bothers me. Just because you're fearing like violence from a gang in your home country does not necessarily mean that you're in a gang. I'm just gonna go over this.
It doesn't imply it though. It does. There is an implication there though.
Yeah, but it's just that it's the implication. So
right.
Abrego,
So it's not founded.
And Aprego's story that he gave the court in 2019. This is the reason. This is his reasoning for why he said that he couldn't be sent back to his country. I'm gonna pull up pull it up. Okay, I have it pulled up already. Do I have it pulled? I do have it pulled up. So let me see if I can find it. Okay, so basically, it's in this testimonial evidence presented. I'm not gonna go through it all because it's kind of long. I'll just give the summary of it. If you want to read through it, just let me know. I can scroll. But basically, so in El Salvador, there's this gang called the Barrio 18 gang that was threatening him and his family because his mom ran they ran some sort of like tortilla business or this pupu sauce business. It's like it's like a bakery or some kind of food that they were selling out of their home.
Pupuseria.
What is that?
I don't know what pupu is, but seria just means like the store of. What's pupu?
I don't. Let me look it up real quick. Okay, so it's a type of tortilla basically. It's almost like a griddle.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, so the mom ran this business out of their home, and everyone in the town knew that they ran this business. Everyone in the family, his dad, his brother, Abrego himself, his two sisters, all helped run the business. This gang, Barrio 18, found out about the business, and they started extorting the family for money, saying they needed to pay them initially monthly, and then they have to pay weekly. in order for them to keep the gang off their back. If they were unable to make these extortion payments, that they threatened the family by saying that they were going to kill Abrego and his brother if they didn't pay. And they also said that the family would not have to pay anymore if Abrego Garcia was allowed to join the gang. The mom didn't want to join the gang. They tried to move to a different town. Now there is some debate over if they took enough steps to get away from the gang, because I think they only moved about 15 minutes away from their old place, and the gang was able to find them again. So after this back and forth with the gang, Kilmar was sent to the United States. That's where he crossed illegally, but he was sent to the United States to get away from the gang, because a lot of the threats centered on threats of his life and his brother's life. And at the time of the hearing, Abrego said that even the family was still dealing with issues with the gang, this time targeting a brother-in-law that was staying with them. So that's their story.
As of when? As of when?
At the time of the hearing in 2019.
Okay.
So yeah, that's his story. That's why they said they couldn't be sent back. I as far as just my general knowledge on gangs, I do know that gangs do extort a lot of the local businesses that have them pay. That's how the gangs make their money. So I think that's also a pretty reasonable implication. I mean, and in this case, it was reasonable enough for the court to grant him that withholding order. I think this is the main thing that was based off of. So when Dinesh
then he should have, as soon as he got to the border, he should have filed an asylum claim. He shouldn't have snuck in illegally.
Oh, that's fair. I mean,
if that was the case.
Yeah, no, that's fair, and I agree that he shouldn't have snuck in illegally.
And then what about his brother? What about his brother? Does his brother come with him?
I don't think
if his life was at risk too.
No, I don't think so. I think it was just Kilmar himself.
Right. I find that interesting.
At least I didn't see anything about the brother. I didn't see anything about the brother being in the United States here.
Plus, I feel at the time, Nayib Bukele became president in 2019. So, I'm sure that there was a strong case for that fear. But, since Nayib Bukele has become president, they've completely turned El Salvador around. So I do think that claim of fear of one's life is not as valid, just considering the safety of the country now and what
that's fair. Yeah,
it has been able to do.
Yeah, if they made the determination, then the political climate or the gang climate in El Salvador has changed from 2019 up until 2025. So we don't feel that your reason for fear of your life is valid in 2025. So we're going to deport you. I would even be fine with that, but they didn't go through the process of doing that. That's my whole argument just rests on that.
Does the story clarify whether he actually joined the gang or not? It sounded he was considering that, but
no, it sounds like he was pressured to join a gang. But in his story, he says that his mom was vehemently against him joining the gang, and then.
But it doesn't say he didn't actually join the gang.
No, it doesn't say if it doesn't say if he actually.
He doesn't deny joining the gang.
No, he's denied being in the gang every time he's been asked.
No. Being in the gang currently, does he deny if he ever joined the gang to begin with?
I didn't see anything about him ever joining. All I saw was that they asked him to be or they tried to extort the family to get him to join the gang, and the mother was against it. So as far as my understanding is he never joined the gang. But there's no explicit I didn't see anything explicitly saying he joined the gang for some amount of time. But I think the story at least implies.
It kind of I think it intentionally leaves it out. I think if you were trying to support the claim that you were never a part of this gang, you would explicitly make that claim. So I don't think it implies he never joined it. I think it doesn't. It intentionally leaves out whether he joined or not, which I feel like he gave this whole narrative it would behoove him to explicitly, claim that he did not in fact join this gang.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just if he did join the gang, then if they did join the gang, just why would he be sent away anyway? If the gang said we're not going to threaten you anymore, if Kilmar joins the gang.
I mean, because, I mean, I'm sure his mom, if he joined the gang, there's still some violence there. There's still some danger there. Like, just because you joined the gang doesn't mean your life isn't at risk. Like, it's probably more at risk because now you have to do stuff, at the request of the gang.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's kind of, I mean, it's, yeah, I'll just
I just
say
find
that,
it interesting that he mentioned that they pressured him to join the gang. He didn't explicitly say whether he denied joining the gang. So I find that interesting.
Oh, let me see. They also told Cecilia that if she could not pay the extortion money, she could turn Cesar over to them as part of the game. The Abrego family paid the money on a regular basis whenever they could and hid Cesar from the gang. On one occasion, the gang came to the family's home and threatened to kill Cesar if the family did not pay rent. The family responded by sending Cesar to the United States. Wait, hold up. Is he called Cesar in this? Oh, okay. So as a fact check on me, Cesar, his brother, because I think Cesar is his brother. Let me find that really quick. Yeah, I think Cesar is his brother, and his family, and Cesar was sent to the United States. So the brother was sent to the United States after Cesar, his brother left, because Kilmar is referred to as a respondent in this document. The gang started recording Kilmar after Cesar left, and they told Cecilia that she would not have to pay rent anymore if she let him join the gang. The member refused to let this happen. The gang threatened to kill Kilmar, or the respondent. When the respondent was around 12 years old, the gang came to the home again, telling Cecilia that they would take him because she was not paying money from the family's business. The father prevented this. The father prevented the gang from taking Kilmar by paying the gang all the money they wanted. During the days, the gang would watch Kilmar as he went back and forth from school. And then the next paragraph kind of talks about them moving. And even though after they moved, the gang found them and continued to extort them. And then after about 4 months of dealing with this, they sent Kilmar to the United States. So the brother was sent first, and then Kilmar was sent afterwards.
All right.
Notable differences between Kilmar and Dinesh.
Right. The point that I'm
but
making
I would argue back at. Yeah, go on.
Sorry,
Which
Pierce,
the gang that's
which is the point that I'm making is they have
El
not
Salvador is not MS-13 from my understanding. So MS-13 is typically more associated with Mexico, and so even especially when you have to illegally cross over the U.S. border or into the U.S., usually you have to associate yourself with the gangs of Mexico, one of them being MS-13, another one being the Sinaloa cartel. And so in order to even get into the U.S. border illegally, you typically have to pay a pretty substantial fee to the gangs of Mexico in order to facilitate that illegal crossing. So anytime somebody...
No, yeah, that could possibly be true. I mean, paying a gang to help you get into the country legally, does that mean you're a part of the gang? But let's even say that, like, to him to get into the country legally, he joined the gang. Okay, go through the process to prove that he's in the gang and deport him. So, like, in this conversation, I can grant you everything that he, like, I could say that, yeah, he is in a gang, but just prove it in the court. And once you go through that process, then deport him. Like, I'm always just going to rest on you didn't follow the due process.
I think just prove that he's an illegal and deport him back to his country of origin. I think it's as simple as that.
But at the time, if he has the withholding of removal order, I mean, you can still technically say he's illegal, but he just can't be deported back to that country.
Which is where it gets gray. But again, I just think it's. I mean, I get it. We have, the courts, and they have their orders that they can give, and the Trump administration didn't follow that order. So I get it. Like, it was a mistake. They shouldn't have done it. They should have, jump the extra hoops just to ensure the kind of validity of their case. But I mean, I'm not about to like weep over an illegal immigrant getting sent back to their country of origin, because to me it's just that simple.
Well, okay, but do you think it's wrong for someone, even if they are here illegally, that because okay, let's back up. Do you think illegal immigrants have a right to a due process to prove that they are here illegally and to be deported?
Yes, and that was proven
How was that proven?
through his asylum claim. He's been here since 2011. He came here illegally, and then he put in an asylum claim in 2019. So there was no asylum claim in 2011, meaning he's been here illegally for 8 years.
So just because of that, you're okay with his deportation?
Yes, he's illegal. He shouldn't be here.
But if he has, okay, so you don't care about the withholding order to not be sent back to El Salvador. And again, he's in jail in El Salvador. As far as I'm concerned, if you get deported back to a country, you don't get sent to jail.
Well, you do if your country determines that you were a criminal and that you should be sent to jail.
So if he only was in jail because of this deal that the U.S. and El Salvador has, would you have an issue with that?
Yeah, I would have more of an issue with that if it was simply based on what the U.S. has said, and it wasn't based on El Salvador's own documentation of his criminal status or his
Are
criminal
you,
activity.
are you interested in what El Salvador used as a reasoning to put him in
No,
jail? Why?
no, because it's not my country. It's not an American citizen. Like, no,
But
there's just so many things to worry about
but
that
would you
for
but would you say that there's no other evidence that El Salvador put him in prison besides the deal? Would you agree with that statement?
as far as I know, yes.
Then why wouldn't you have an issue with it if all the evidence points to that he's only in jail because the United States said that he's a criminal, so El Salvador put him in jail?
Because there's just too many things for me to worry about than to worry about an illegal immigrant who came here illegally, who violated uh, all of our laws to get in here. So as far as I'm concerned, it's like kind of tit for tat. You shouldn't be here. Go back to your country.
And it doesn't bother you at all that he's in jail right now?
No, it doesn't bother me enough. Going forward, if Trump does this again, then it'll bother me more. But
Why would it
as
bother
far
you
as
more
I'm
the second
concerned,
time?
because because this time it could be considered a mistake. Next time it would be knowingly. It would be knowingly. Um, they would be doing it knowingly. Yeah, they would be doing it knowingly.
But wasn't this the case where there was a? Now I'm trying to remember the very beginning of it, because I remember when I think this was the case. Correct me if I'm wrong. That there was this plane that was set to be sent to El Salvador that Kilmar was on, and there was like a last minute court order. I think it was actually from this Maryland court where they said no, you can't that plane cannot fly out because there's someone there that has a withholding order to be deported to El Salvador. But it was kind of like, well, it's too late. We already sent them out. So to me, it was just like even preemptively, even though it was last minute, because well, it kind of seems like Trump's been just doing all these different deportations like really quick and really fast, and it doesn't really seem like you really care about following the entire process itself. Um, so even preemptively, it seems like there was an order. Unless I'm getting mixed up, because I know this
Well, the
case.
order it wasn't in the actual judge's order, but the judge had issued an order verbally to clarify the written order. And by that time that the judge gave the verbal order, the plane was already in the sky, and the the Trump administration was not going to turn that plane around because again it was a verbal order in order to clarify the written order. And so it was kind of like this gray area of like, well, uh, the verbal order, is that something that will stand up in court? And so they didn't bring the plane back because of that kind of gray area as to what needs to be followed, whether it's the verbal order or the written order, which from my understanding, they did follow the written order, but then there was the verbal order that they didn't follow because of the gray area and the authority on verbal orders.
But isn't that an issue that we're deporting people because of like this gray that we know? Well, I don't know if Trump knew it was gray or not, but if it even has any kind of potential to be gray, then you shouldn't be deporting those people.
Well, I mean, these things are all very tricky. Like the process of it all, especially when you think about how the process wasn't really followed and how like these illegal aliens were all let in against the kind of the laws that are on the book and protecting our border. And so I kind of understand the urgency that the Trump administration feels in getting things done in this 4 years and getting just the illegal immigrants out of the country because they're not supposed to be here. And so,
and I would understand that if it was like someone had just committed a crime, and you say, okay, well you don't have any kind of like legal status here, so we're just going to deport you immediately. Like that would be understanding. But when Kilmar was picked up, he what was he picked up for? Was it speeding?
I actually don't know the more recent pickup.
Yeah.
No, he was picked up on the deportation order, I thought.
So he just had a deportation order out for him, so the cops just found him and just deported him?
I don't know. That's just what I heard. He was picked up on the deportation order. Because that's what they're like. That's the Trump administration's first step in getting out as many illegal immigrants as possible is just going through who already had deportation orders and who wasn't being deported during the Biden administration based on these orders. They're going through. That's one of the ways that they're getting the first contacts that they're having is with people who already have deportation orders.
So where did this deportation order come from?
That I'm not entirely clear about because again, I thought there was a deportation order and then there was a follow-up with the withholding order, but I don't know if those two things were in the same document, if they were two separate documents. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Had to face a judge in order to deport this man, and they've made a determination without providing any evidence. It's very easy to see a Democratic version of Donald Trump doing this to someone that they disagree with. Like it's not that I'm questioning your immigration status or anything. I'm saying that there is.
Oh, I can't. It's not playing for me. Oh, there we go. No, yeah. I just wasn't on the right tab.
Okay. You were just sitting there in silence, just like, what's going on?
Yeah, literally.
A due process in this country, and we have to get those things right. Kilmar was already going through that process with ICE, and we can attack people because they came here illegally. A lot of our ancestors came here illegally. If I had to guess, I'm Irish and Italian. A lot of my ancestors probably didn't come here through the proper channels either. And what I want to make sure is we don't fall down a slippery slope where we're not having due process.
Well, first of all,
I think also, Dinesh. Well, hang on, Dinesh. Before you respond, I would on that ICE point. You know, my understanding about this guy is that for the last few years, every year, he has been interviewed by ICE. He has no criminal record. They've established no crime that he's committed. He is a father of 3 kids with special needs. And he has persistently denied ever being a member of MS-13. And the only person, it seems, who has said he was is an anonymous source who identified him as somebody they believe to be a member of MS-13. There's no other independent corroborative evidence that he was a gang member. Now, the significance of that, you know, in relation to your point, Dinesh, about, well, you know, why would he be under threat? There are lots of people who are not members of gangs who are threatened by gangs. Right, one of the tactics that gangs often use is extortion, racketeering, threats, and so on, harassment. We know this. It goes back to the mob, right? I mean, this is how they made a lot of their money. So I think the idea that he would have to be a gang member himself to be under threat from a gang, I don't think that is credible in his case. If you look at the background to it, there could be plenty of other reasons. But surely the fact that ICE was seeing him every year but did not determine that he should be deported is in his favor, isn't it? And at what point is he just then put on a plane and put into one of the worst hellholes of any prison anywhere in the world, purely because it seems to me of one anonymous source 8 years ago who thinks he recognized him as a gang member, when nobody else has corroborated that?
Well, the immigration judge, as I understand, accepted the testimony that he is in fact a gang member, but nevertheless said that despite that, he should not be returned because he might face danger at home. I also understand that this so-called rival gang has essentially been wiped off the scene in El Salvador. I mean, Bukele has had this massive crackdown in which the gangs just don't have the kind of power that they once did. But I think the bigger picture here, Piers, is this. You have millions of people who have broken the law and come here illegally. They're in the country. I think that Trump has a referendum or a mandate, not simply to seal the border against new illegals, but also to send the illegals who are here back home. Now, the Democrats are saying, no, what you need to do now is set up an elaborate judicial process where each of these, let's just say 5, 7, 10 million illegals all get to go to court over a period of months, if not years. And so in effect, what it does is it makes permanent the illegal move on the part of the Biden administration to bring all those people here for entirely nefarious political motives.
So to that point, because this like argument that I heard that Dinesh just said, I know that JD Vance made a very similar argument on Twitter. Did you see that tweet?
No.
It was, let's see if I can pull it up right now. It was basically just like, because there are so many illegal immigrants that are here, that the Democrats are asking for them to all kind of go through this process in order to kind of slow down the removal of like illegal immigrants, and thus as a way keeping them here, which
I totally agree with.
Well, okay, so I disagree, and the main reason is that, yeah, like, are there a lot of like illegal immigrants in this country? Sure, like almost positively, yes, there are. But like when I start hearing arguments that we gotta like forego our process or jump over the process because it's just gonna take way too long to do it, that is like some totalitarian stuff that I just cannot get with whatsoever. I get the argument, and yeah, it may end up resulting where like, yeah, it's gonna take a really long time to like remove all the different legal immigrants that are here. Like, I understand the argument, but it seems like you're just arguing to just not follow the process that we already have on the books. If you don't like the process, change the process. Get a different law on the books so you can expedite it. But for you to just kind of like judicious.
Well, they did. Well, they did bypass that process by labeling MS-13 a terrorist organization, which, from my understanding, the Supreme Court ruled on that, the lawfulness of that.
No, and that's fine. I mean, yeah, if being illegal, if you're here in the country illegally or through an asylum claim, whatever, and we find that you are part of a terrorist organization, which I have no qualms with designating MS-13 as a terrorist organization, okay then. But then you got to prove that whoever you're accusing of being in the organization is a part of that organization. And with Kilmar specifically, I don't think the Trump administration did enough to prove that.
What would be enough to prove that?
Go through a court process.
Does the person have to? Again, but see, that's the thing that JD Vance is talking about. Is now you have to facilitate. Well, with like some of the evidence that they've provided, the tattoos on his hands, the police interaction where he was found with other gang-affiliated members, where he had wads of money, he had drug paraphernalia on him. The money was, the eyes and the mouth were blacked out, which is commonly associated with MS-13 gang members.
Yeah, but okay, but like, take all that evidence
and that was in
put it in front of a court.
And see, but that's where the process becomes stifling. And again, if you have to do that for every single person that's here illegally as a gang affiliate, like that, again, that slows down the process to where the Trump can't execute on the promise that he made to the American people. Especially when
Yeah,
you have
but
all of these judges that are coming out and kind of pushing. They're like, I would say, excessively pushing back against what the American people voted for, which is getting out illegal immigrants, crime affiliated or not.
yeah, but then like if okay, let's say that okay, the courts are going too slow. Do we just trust the Trump administration for making that determination? Because the Trump administration has its own incentives for deporting as many people as possible. And I'm not saying people like they're just going to deport anyone, but it's just like okay, like to me, the judge is being biased, which it depends on the judge. But I'm not going to say that there's no biased judge out there that's going to try to purposely slow down the process. But obviously, like the administration itself is biased in this way. This is why we have the process of going through courts so people can make their arguments, and those arguments are
I mean,
public. And those arguments are
the only
public.
thing,
Well, go ahead.
well, just the only thing I disagree with when it comes to what the Trump administration did is sending him to the prison, because that does require, I think, a bit more of evidence and a legal process to send him to the prison. But sending him back to El Salvador, it's like, okay, whatever.
Okay, but
He was illegal.
he is in prison. So is that not enough for?
No, no, no. That's the part that I do disagree with. But at this point, it's kind of like too little, too late. I'm not going to be concerned about someone who came into the country illegally, who there is some evidence to support that he was a part of a gang that wasn't borne out in court, which is where the issue is. But
that's a pretty big issue, right?
No.
Why not?
Because he's an illegal immigrant.
That's all. That's all.
Yeah, pretty much. Don't break our laws. Especially when a lot of this breaking of our laws was facilitated by the Biden administration.
Yeah, but so first of all, the only law that he broke was coming to the country illegally. Now I'm not saying that's not enough for him to be deported. Like, okay, he came into the country illegally. But two things. For one, he came into the country illegally from 2011 to 2019. After that, he had the withholding order for him not to be deported back to El Salvador. As far as I'm concerned, he's not an illegal immigrant at that point. Like, he has a basis for being here in the country. But if you want to say, okay, he initially came to the country illegally, and that's why we wanted to deport him, that's fine. But I think it is really gross that because we have this deal with El Salvador, that anyone that we find to be deported, that we're going to send him to this prison, even though as far as I know, he doesn't have a criminal record here. And if he has a criminal record in El Salvador, then just deport him and then let El Salvador round him up. But if we have this deal where anyone that we round up immediately gets sent to prison, that's gross. That's really scary, and I just don't think anyone should be subjugated to that. If you committed a crime, that's one thing, but Kilmar didn't commit a crime.
You don't have to commit a crime to prove gang affiliation. So it's not that he needs to. You don't have to commit a crime to prove gang affiliation. So
but they didn't prove gang affiliation. They never proved that.
They have.
No,
well, there was no court case. No. I didn't say they did. No, if you just let me speak, what I said was yes, there was no court case to prove that. There is still some evidence to support his gang affiliation.
Yeah, but the evidence is not enough to prove it. Would you agree with that or no?
It's enough to prove it. It's just not. It's not legally proven.
Well, isn't the legal basis for proving that the only thing that matters?
Not if you're an illegal.
Why does that distinction matter, legal or illegal, when it comes to proving that someone's a part of a gang or not?
Because you shouldn't be. Well,
if you're legally or illegally, I think doesn't matter your legal status. You should still have your day in court in order to prove whether you're a part of a gang or not. If they said, okay, you're not a part of a gang,
who pays for his attorney?
Doesn't he get a public defender at that point?
Exactly. Our money is paying for his attorney, even though he's here illegally. He's not legally required to pay taxes. So now the Americans have to foot the bill in order for this guy to fight his case. Nah, I'm just not for it.
So what if he got his own attorney? Would you say he has a right to a court case then?
I mean, that's still our judges, like who are being paid for by our taxes in order to see the court case of this guy who's an illegal immigrant.
Well,
Like,
you're always going to need a judge to adjudicate whether someone's illegal or not.
right, but that isn't that what the immigration court is for?
Is he not seen in immigration court?
For his just to determine if he's legal or not.
Yeah, isn't he just seeing? Isn't he just? Yeah, he's seen.
So then, how the because it's one thing to determine legal status. That's what the immigration court is for. But now you're talking about determining criminal status. That's from wouldn't that be a different court?
Well, no, like what I'm referring to is just gang status. Like if let's say that ICE found him, right? I don't know, like speeding or something, whatever. And it's like, okay, you get a ticket, but we think that you're an illegal immigrant. It's like, oh no, I'm not illegal. I have an asylum claim. I'm not even using Kilmar. I'm just using like a hypothetical. Okay, it's like, okay, well, we're gonna find this out in the courts, and let's say that like, okay, you do have an asylum claim, and it was granted, but we found out that you're also a part of this terrorist organization, so we're gonna deport you because you're a part of that. I would be perfectly fine with that. So it's not really people committing crimes.
But then deport him where? Deport him where? Because there's a withholding order.
Well, I would say that if you're a part of a gang, if you're a part of a gang, I don't know how it works legally, but at least from a moral perspective, I would say that prior withholding order or whatever other asylum claim was granted, that it just gets nullified and you get deported back to your original country.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Again, I disagree with the fact that they sent him to a prison. I mean, I don't even really disagree with that. I just think it would have been cleaner on their part if they provided that evidence to a judge, which I don't know if they have or have not. Like,
I think the only time that whether he was a part of a gang was adjudicated was like a bond hearing that he had. Here, let me pull up the document. It's not a document. It's just like I was talking to Chat GPT. Let me see.
and then I would be curious to know if. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so the bond hearing actually happened in 2019 as well. So it probably had to do with the initial arrest because he was arrested in 2019.
Right.
So there was a bond hearing saying that like, hey, we can't let him out. There's a bug. I'm assuming, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm assuming that the bond hearing was saying that like okay, like yeah, he probably is in it, that the DSS alleged that he was in a gang. The judge probably said that like yeah, he probably is in a gang. They did end up granting him his bond anyway. But later that year he came back in to have the rest of his case adjudicated, and that's where they gave him the withholding order. So in May he was arrested.
So the judge did determine he wasn't a gang then, likely.
The judge granted him bond anyway, finding evidence presented, like the informant's claims and streetwear, was not strong enough to label him a danger to the community. That's all.
But you did say that the judge did say that he's likely in a gang. You just said that.
I probably was wrong. Well, I'm trying to see if there's even a source here, because specifically what it says, and I'll even pull it up for you if you go to Discord. Oh, no, it's already up in Discord. Specifically, it says that the immigration judge granted him the bond anyway, finding the evidence presented, like the informant and the streetwear, was not strong enough to label him a danger to the community. So that's what it says. That's what it says specifically. So I guess what I meant to say before is like, if he was labeled as being a part of a gang, it would have been in that bond hearing, because that's just what I've heard from just hearing about the case. But you can start the video as I look into this.
All right.
from tariffs to market turmoil, things are looking pretty rough out there. Well, our
skip this,
sponsor,
this
American Hartford Gold, has an answer. There are many new threats to financial stability, a full-blown trade war, a fluctuating stock market, an uncertain bond market.
Our job to protect every single
market, stubborn inflation. Let's do what you just 3-2, or follow the link below. Okay, let me bring in Kim Iverson. Welcome to Uncensored. Kim, what's your response to what you just heard?
I think we're just losing the plot here. I mean, the fact that Trump used terrorism. I mean, look, this guy, if he's illegal, if he's part of MS-13, great, get him out of here. Don't let the door hit him on the way out. I'm happy to deport all of the people who are illegally in this country. They all should go. They don't need to be here. If he's an El Salvadorian citizen, then he's back in El Salvador. It's El Salvador's problem. If he's got a problem in El Salvador, he's going to have to deal with it. It's not our job to protect every single person on earth. Otherwise, we'd be opening the door to millions more people. But I think we're losing the plot in the fact that Trump used terrorism as his excuse to deport these people. And that sets such a dangerous precedent. We have courts to deal with illegals. They're not supposed to be here. We can put them through. We could do rocket dockets. We don't have to make it these long, drawn-out court cases that Dinesh is talking about. We can move them through the courts very, very quickly. And as Dinesh pointed out, the border is already secure. We don't have any new people coming through. So great. Now we just deal with the people that are here. We can't get rid of due process in order to do that. But terrorism, using terrorism, I mean, this is so dangerous. Talk about going back to Patriot Act. This is how we ended up with Guantanamo. This is how we ended up with black sites. This is how we ended up with indefinite detention. We don't want that. And this could be used against every single American. Once they set up these processes, they don't get rid of them. They use them, and they're gonna start using them against all of us. So terrorism as the reason, when we have laws in place to get rid of all of the illegals in this country, sets that dangerous precedent that we should all be extremely alarmed by. So I'm all about it. Get rid of all the illegals, sure. Let's not use terrorism. Let's not use the excuse of in the name of national security in order to get rid of all of our constitutional rights. You know, those go out the window. Due process, it just completely goes away. Court hearings disappear. We need to keep all of that in place. That is what makes America America. So I'm extremely alarmed by the use of terrorism as the excuse.
Okay, Jack Posobiec, you posted this. They all have to go, and then unhumans. And there was a pretty big reaction to that. I mean, what did you mean by calling them unhuman?
Well, Unhumans is actually, Piers, thanks so much for having me on. First time. But Unhumans is the name of the book, New York Times bestseller that myself and Joshua Lysek put out last year. We talked about the secret history of communist revolutions and how to crush them. And we talk about how in the past the releasing of criminals and the coddling of criminals by people like the Bolsheviks or the French revolutionaries or the Chinese Communist Party were used as terror tactics against their own countries. And that's exactly what we see the Democrats doing now with the release of and the championing for the release of violent criminals into either the United States or back into the populace. You see this with Soros prosecutors. You see this with the reaction to Carmelo Anthony. And now you see this with this ridiculous political stunt, where Senator Chris Van Hollen is now on a plane down to El Salvador for, I guess, a special visit. I don't know if this is a first date kind of situation while he's down there with Abrego Garcia, but he's not going to visit with the actual members of the family of Rachel Morin and the 5 children that are left behind, who was killed and raped by an illegal alien member of MS-13 in his own state. And so you see this problem that the Democrats have, where, by the way, I love if the Democrats want to make this their argument for the midterms going into 2026. Please make illegal aliens and support for MS-13 Mike, please go tell all your buddies on the Democrat side. I would love for you to make this your argument going in, that we need more illegal aliens in the country. I'm right there with you, because I think that's perfect for the Democrats. They consistently do this over and over and over. And, you know, people say that this guy doesn't have a criminal record. Well, it just broke earlier today that, as a matter of fact, Abrego Garcia did actually have, his wife had a restraining order on him that was filed in 2021, that it was petitioned, a final order was put up, and yet I don't hear anyone talking about this, that in fact he was a wife beater in addition to this information that he was a member of MS-13. And people...
Okay. So just really quick, I pulled up the document, and I'm just going to read it so I don't misquote. I just had it. Okay, so this is all for a bond hearing on that initial arrest in May of 2019. After considering the information provided by both parties, the court concluded that no bond was appropriate in this matter. The court first reasoned that the respondent failed to meet his burden of demonstrating his release for custody would not pose a danger to others, as evidence shows that as the evidence shows that he is a verified member of MS-13. And then there's a little bit more about it. Okay, although the court is reluctant to give evidentiary weight to the respondent's clothing as an indication of gang affiliation, the fact that a past proven and reliable source of information verified the respondent's gang membership, rank, and gang name is sufficient to support that the respondent is a gang member, and the respondent has failed to present evidence to rebut that assertion. So in the bond hearing, with the evidence shown, mainly because of the reliable source saying that he was a part of that gang, that the court did make a determination in regards to the bond itself that he was a member of MS-13. Within the bond hearing, just really quick, my understanding that when it comes to bond, that there's a lower evidentiary like weight, not weight, but like a standard needs to be met just to give someone bond or not. So I would still say that this is not enough to prove that he's part of MS-13, but if a judge wanted to say that we're not going to give him bond and let him out of jail because there's enough evidence to keep him in jail until he has his actual court date, I mean, that's fine for me.
Yeah, I don't know. So he's a gang member.
No, he's not. I mean, it wasn't proven. It was just it was enough evidence for him.
It wasn't disproven, and
yeah, it wasn't disproven.
They said
it wasn't disproven in the bond hearing. Yeah, but it wasn't. I don't.
And it was verified by the judge in that case.
I wouldn't even say it was verified. It was just the
It just said it. It just said it.
And for the bond hearing, you don't understand that bond hearings. There's just to let someone out on bond, there's a lower standard that's met just to keep someone in jail until they actually have their court date.
Right, but they didn't say that it because it was because there's a probable cause that he's a gang member. It literally says that from the reliable source, there's enough information sufficient to support the respondent is a gang member.
In relation to the bond hearing.
Okay, that's fine. But again, they didn't say there's a probable cause, like it's probable that they said there's enough to support that he is a gang member. It wasn't like there's enough to support that he might be a gang member. Otherwise, I think they would have they would have been specific to that point.
So why didn't they deport him in his later hearing that same year?
Well, the bond hearing was to get him the bond based on the arrest that he had and that related to this bond hearing. When it comes to deportations, that's up to ICE, that's up to the immigration officials within the executive branch. But again, if this is during the Biden time,
it's the Trump administration. It's 2019.
Yeah, which only really gave them a year to do so. And plus, Trump was dealing with a much more disagreeable cabinet and cabinet members and administration during that time. So I don't think he had as much cooperation as he does now in his current administration.
But I don't even think how involved is Trump in this, especially if it's like someone that's proven to be in the MS-13 gang. Like what barriers would they have hit? It was like
there has been like I've seen some things mentioned where like the Biden administration, granted this would there was a year before Biden was actually in office, but the Biden administration was like there was the orders being given down from the Biden administration to hold off on deportation orders.
What do you mean there were orders given by the Biden administration?
There was like based on the cabinet members within Biden's administration, there was part of the leniency that there was on immigration was based on orders coming down from the top.
To who?
To the people who execute on these things.
Like the judges and stuff?
No, it would be people within the executive. I'm just saying, you said, why wasn't he deported? I'm just saying a possible reason why.
Yeah, but I don't think that's likely.
I mean, with how much illegal immigration we had and during the Biden administration, I don't see how it's unlikely.
That
something changed.
That a person that wasn't even in office at the time was given orders to not deport people, and in this case, that if they knew that he was in a gang, not to deport people that were known to be in gangs.
Well, I'm not speaking to the year that Biden wasn't in office. As for the year that he wasn't, like this 2019 where he wasn't deported, who knows? There could be plenty of reasons why he wasn't deported.
I would just say that that's
I would say
the fact that he wasn't deported not only after the hearing, but for all the different ICE meetups that he had since he had the withholding order, that would be a sign that, like, okay, even though initially the evidence in the bond hearing that we thought that you were in a gang, since then we don't think that you're in a gang, so we're going to let you stay here.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible, but there's plenty of other possibilities. Like, it's all speculation. But at the end of the day, like, he wasn't deported at that time.
And you know what would help with all this speculation? If he just had a proper hearing before he was deported back to El Salvador this year.
Well, it wouldn't really help with the speculation as to 2019.
Yeah, but it would help with the speculation now.
But we're talking about the bond hearing of 2019, and you're asking why wasn't he deported at that time? I'm just saying there could be plenty of reasons. Like, what month was this in 2019?
The bond hearing was in May. The withholding.
The date says August and September.
No. Wait. I'm looking at something else. What do I have up right now? Sorry, I got a bunch of different stuff. No. Sorry. The withholding, the bond hearing was in 2019. Yeah, so the bond hearing, I have it up right now, was April 29th of 2019. That was the bond hearing. The withholding order, that was August 9th and September 27th.
Okay, so what happened between the bond hearing and then the withholding? And the bond hearing didn't let him out on bail, but he still got out on bail, it sounds like. Right?
Well, his bond was declined. So I think what ChatGPT said here was incorrect, which that sometimes happens. Unless he had another bond hearing, unless he had another bond hearing and it was accepted that second time. But as far as I know, you only had the one.
Yeah, I mean, why wasn't he deported then? Who knows? He's deported now. That's what matters.
But you should follow proper procedure. But you disagree.
Well, I just think the proper procedure is going to be different for legal immigrants and American citizens than it is for illegal.
But even illegal immigrants have a right to proper procedure.
Do they?
I think
so.
Do they? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that's true.
I mean, all the courts are saying that there's a procedure that needs to be followed, and they say Trump didn't follow the procedure, so obviously something was violated.
Well, the procedure based on him going to prison in El Salvador versus the procedure for him to actually be deported. So it sounds like the procedure.
But we're talking
deportation.
about him being in prison in El Salvador. That's the whole thing.
Right.
If he was just deported, I don't think this story would have gained as much traction as it did now. But
doubtful, because Democrats and the media will fearmonger about any little thing Trump does, whether it's big or not.
Fearmongering. A guy was sent to prison, even though there's no credible that he has a credible criminal
fearmongering.
history.
blowing it way out of proportion.
How is that fair? A guy was sent to prison, and even though he has no criminal record here in the United States,
There was some evidence to support his gang affiliation. And okay, when you say no criminal record, when he got arrested, so he wasn't convicted?
He wasn't convicted. No.
Why wasn't he convicted?
I honestly have no idea why he wasn't convicted. But I would assume it's because they didn't find anything that stuck with him, so he wasn't convicted.
Or he just never had his case, which would be crazy.
Well, yeah, he just got lost. I mean, that'd be crazy. I would agree with you, but I'm not going to assume that that's what happened. I think the safe assumption.
No, I know. No, I don't think it's a safe assumption because it's not based on any verifiable evidence.
Well, what?
I think there's gonna be all it can be is assumptions. I don't think you can like safely assume, oh well, because he got arrested and there was no case to prove he was not convicted, that the safe assumption is that he was not convicted. I don't think that's a safe assumption.
Why would that not be a safe assumption?
Because it's not based on any trial that he had.
So, yeah, but we're just not aware.
Like there could be many because there could be many reasons why that arrest wasn't seen through. I don't think that the safe assumption is, oh well, he just wasn't guilty.
So what would be the safe assumption? Or you're saying there's no safe assumption?
There's no safe assumption. We have to figure out why, like what happened to his arrest.
Let's see here. So ChatGPT says, I think I over rely on ChatGPT sometimes, but it says he was never. But it says he was never charged with anything.
He was never charged. Okay.
Yeah, because no criminal charges were ever filed. Because let me pull up these sources. Because basically it's saying, it's saying that no criminal charges were filed because there was the gang affiliation, which I guess at first you would need to know what he got arrested for just loitering.
It was for loitering, the drug paraphernalia, and he had drugs on him. Where was he arrested?
At Home Depot.
No, what state? Maryland?
I think Maryland, yeah. Well, I'll look into that. I'm going to play the video.
All right.
People will sit there blue in the face and say, "Oh, he was this innocent guy. He was just working." It's simply not true.
Right, but you're saying it's simply not true. You believe 100% he was an MS-13 gang member. My concern about this story is not that if he is a gang member,
the order that he was
gang,
deported was not that he was MS-13 member. It was that he was illegal. That was the original order. And then the second order came out that said he was deported to a different country, not El Salvador.
So hold on for just a second. First of all,
so you see what I mean by they keep talking about two different orders. One was a deportation order, and then there was a follow-up with the withholding order. That's what I keep hearing.
So my guess would be, okay, so I think I have a little bit more clarity. So the reason why charges were not filed in that arrest was that it looks like it just went straight to the immigration system because they suspected him being an illegal immigrant. So they didn't even bother filing charges, at least initially. I don't know why they didn't do it afterwards. They didn't even bother filing charges about that arrest. They were just focused on his legal status here, which is why he went to the immigration courts and you get the withholding order later that year.
It sounds like there was two different orders. That's what I keep hearing, so I'm like a little confused.
So I think the deportation order came from the DHS in 2019, and that's where you get the withholding order. So I think the deportation order happens first. He goes in front of a court. He pleads his case. Judge says, okay, like, we're going to give you this withholding order because your story for why you can't go back to El Salvador is credible enough for us not to send you back there. So I think initially it's a deportation order, and then in reaction to that, it would be a withholding order. That's what it sounds like. Which
Okay.
I'm.
That sounds reasonable.
But if that's so, but so when Trump deports him in 2025, is he just doing it off of that same deportation order?
I suppose.
But,
Because that, from my understanding, that's how the Trump administration is operating, based on who they're deciding to initiate contact with, and like in their first round of deportations, it's just people who have deportation orders. And so it would actually make a lot of sense if all they have on file is deportation orders, and maybe they didn't look into the specifics of each case as to like, oh, this person actually has a withholding order. This person actually like all the nuances of the case. They're just going based on possibly a list of deportation orders. That would actually make a lot of sense.
Would you say just procedurally that if they're only going off the deportation order, and I guess the first question would be like, does the Trump administration have access to any preceding orders that happens after the deportation order?
I think it would. I'm sure that they could gain access. Now, if they have like direct access, I think that would depend on, like, for example, in Kilmar Abrego's case, if that was a state, the withholding order, that would be through the immigration.
Yeah, that would be
it would be federal
system.
So I would imagine that they would have access to it, but how they actually access it might be different than how they would just access straight deportation orders. Could be, I'm not sure.
Because I would hope that if there's a deportation, at least if there's ever like an initial deportation order, and let's say that order, I don't know if you want to use the word canceled out or postponed or whatever because of a preceding order that happens, I would hope that the Trump administration is at least aware of that. Like if there's a deportation order and we just haven't picked the guy up years later, I mean, that's one thing, and I would say that's fine, for the most part at least. But yeah, if he's not looking into like anything preceding that, then would you say that's an issue? I mean, I
would. I really just want to say no, because like the time is limited. They're like, I'm just for them getting rid of as many illegals as possible. So,
but
it's like, how much time and how much resources are you going to expend on going through the nuances and the nitty gritty of all of these cases? Like that requires a lot of time and a lot of resources, which just holds up the actual goal.
Yeah, but like, there's the means and then there's the ends, right? Like the means to an end. Like I think you should be more focused on the means rather than the end. Because if you start deporting people,
well, the means would have been the deportation order, and so I want to say that I'm mostly okay with them just going based off the deportation orders. But again, then you run into the risk of like this situation here where it's like, okay, what are the nuances of each case? Are you going to expend that time and those resources to go through that for each single person that has a deportation order? That's a lot of resource to waste on each person. And so you're trying to balance following the orders and following the law with also being efficient.
Yeah, but for once, because I think this Kilmar case, like it does make me worried that there's other people that have similar kind of like cases that are being held up, but I would still say that that's a vast minority of people. If I have to guess, I would think that most people just have the deportation order and nothing else, and they just haven't been picked up.
I imagine what the Trump administration would guess.
Yeah, but
they have a deportation order. Why have they been here so long? Let's get them out.
But you should verify it, right? If you're not verifying,
what's required? But what's required to verify that? Again, if you're having to jump through all these hoops to verify that, then you're ready. You do that at the expense of efficiency and getting or achieving what you promised that you were going to do.
But again, it's the means. It's the means and the ends. Like let's say
how much means are you trying to investigate? That's what you're.
Yeah,
It's
but
like it's not
you're
that
making
they
it
didn't.
sound like.
It's not that they didn't have the means. They did have the means because they had the deportation order, but they didn't go into the extent of the means.
But you're making it sound like every single illegal immigrant, all 20 million of them, have this specific thing where they have like an additional
No, the
order.
Democrats are making it seem that way. This is
No,
one
because
guy.
you're citing all the time that it would take. Like, would Trump fail in his goal of? Let's say that Abrego was like the only person that had this. I'm not saying it is. Let's just say that he was the only person. Would Trump fail in his goal? And after 4 years he deported all other illegal immigrants, but Abrego was still in the country, getting this case adjudicated, would that be a failure of his goal?
Well, no, but the point is like, what are the hoops you have to go through in order to investigate the depths of those means? You would have to do that for every single person, whether it was proven that they had nuances to their case or not. So it's like you still have to jump through the hoops, whether people have the same situation as Kilmar or not.
Okay, I
And so
see.
it's like,
I
what?
see what I see what you mean. So it's
Right?
not,
Like they.
but okay. Well, I don't want to be cutting you off, dude. Go ahead.
No. I'm just saying, like, it's not that every single person is going to have the same issue as Kilmar Abrego, but it's what would they have to do in order to determine those extra orders that are associated with the case. And they would have to jump through those hoops for every person, whether that was the same for every person or not. And
So
so that's what I mean by it's like that's why it's hard for me to like feel this like gross injustice about this case and every single person that needs that the people are claiming need to have like this uh extra like this extra procedural uh or processes with each of these people. It's because we don't actually know what like we don't know the ins and outs of all that it requires in order to justify all of what I mean, everything that's required in order for the Trump administration to be completely clean in the eyes of the public and the eyes of some of these and some of these courts that are very much biased against Trump. And so because I don't know that, I'm focused on the goal. And like I recognize that in any administration, anytime you're trying to achieve something, there's going to be mistakes that are had, there's going to be um, things that get missed, and so my hope would be going forward, now that this has been caught, that this doesn't happen again, or that there's a valid explanation as to why this happened in the first place. So
well,
I'm just
why
waiting for further information to come out and other cases to come out to then justify, okay, actually they are doing this very like intentionally and negligently and like unjustifiably. I haven't seen that yet, and I'm focused on the goal.
Okay, so three things. So the first is that, and it is a question. Why, why only hope for that? Why not hope that Trump can still properly carry out these deportations? Which the assumption being, and I would agree with your assumption, is that this Abrego case is the anomaly. That it's not the standard. It is the anomaly. Why can't the hope be that, okay, he continues to deporting people that there's no legal thing holding him up for being deported, but also just bring this guy back in for a due process case and just deport him again under the correct avenues? Like, why can't we want both of those things?
Well, I just don't see that as very pragmatic to expend more resources on someone who's not supposed to be here in the
Yeah,
first
but if
place.
but if
And I
if
think it requires there's another player involved in that equation, which is Bukele, and so you can't just put that onus on Trump. Now you
it
could
but
you could ask for him to do more. I don't disagree with that, and he probably could do more. I don't
do you
really
think he should?
care.
Do
And
you think he should?
no, no,
But
no, I
okay,
don't.
that is the key I think, well, there's a bunch of key disagreements, but as far as like point one, that is the key disagreement. I think when you, regardless if you're a legal citizen or illegal citizen, we have these processes in for a reason. We follow these processes for a reason. So we do make sure that things are being done cleanly. And if that's violated for one person, I think you should do everything to fix that violation of that person's rights. Just because someone's an illegal citizen here in the United States does not mean they don't get any type of rights here. They still do follow some sort of process. Like, we don't just round up legal immigrants and just put them in jail. because we think that they're illegal. No, we have these.
No, we round them up and we deport them.
Yeah, no, I agree. But again, the whole process of that deportation, you got to follow that process. And just because the issue is large enough and it would take a lot of time, I'm not even saying that it wouldn't take a lot of time. But when we start getting into these arguments that because the issue is so big, because the issue would take a lot of time, or because the issue is very urgent, that we can start foregoing the rights that we put on the books for them to have for the process, and we start saying that we can skip over that for an issue that we're having, that those are very scary arguments that leads into authoritarianism. A lot of people disagree when we started violating a lot of the U.S. citizens' rights when it came to the Patriot Act after that terrorist attack in 2011. And again, yeah, the difference is that legal citizens and illegal citizens, yeah. But again, like, the foundational argument is that we don't violate individual rights because of a wider goal. And I don't think that illegal immigrants should be excluded from that argument because they're not here legally. Because again, that is a moral.
Well, the question is, are we?
That's a moral issue.
The question is, are we? But the question is, were his rights violated? Especially based on the. Yeah, you could think that. Doesn't make it true.
If he didn't go through the process, then his rights are violated.
Well, actually, there's multiple processes, and so it's like, what is the legal basis here, especially when the Trump administration is using, and I forget the name of the act, but it's the act that pretty much allows him to.
I forget the name. I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about. So based on that act, what's the legal basis for determining someone's gang affiliation? That I don't know. And so I just think there's more information that needs to be had before jumping to like the strong criticism of the Trump administration in favor of someone who is an illegal immigrant.
But it's not about being against or for the Trump administration. I mean, I'm against them in this way, but it's if any administration starts bypassing the process.
But that's what the Biden administration did.
No,
and the Democrats. They did. They allowed all these illegal immigrants to come in against the laws on the books for the border and not allowing people to cross the border. They violated all of that. So it's like,
so first of all, let's just go back to the Biden administration because he's going to come up a lot in this discussion, whether we have this discussion today or in the future. My understanding of why we had so many people crossing the border illegally is that people would cross illegally and then they would claim asylum once they were found. Now the proper avenue is to go to like a border crossing, a specific designated border crossing where you go to claim asylum. But once someone makes an asylum claim, you go through that asylum claim. Now, I would not say that that's the fault of any specific administration, because as far as I know, Biden did not make any changes to the asylum laws while he was in office.
Well, he did it instead of putting the illegal immigrants in detention centers, which was the procedure before the Biden administration. You put them into the detention center. Instead, they let them into the country. They use a bunch of taxpayer dollars to put a lot of these people up in hotels. They came out with an executive order that granted a lot of these illegal immigrants temporary protective status, which I believe is or was being fought in court as to whether that was legal. And so like they jumped through a bunch of loopholes to get all of these illegal immigrants into the country in a very unclean way, and I get the concern and wanting to make sure that Trump doesn't, just completely wreck all of our laws and our due process. But I do think that it's a bit of a conundrum when he's trying to rectify a lot of negligent or even unlawful actions of the previous administration.
Yeah, okay. I mean, but again, this discussion is not about Trump. This discussion is not about Trump just deporting people. Even both people in the video that we were watching, which I don't think we're going to finish it, but they both said, yeah, if you're here illegally, you get deported. the argument, it's all just about the process that the Trump administration is following. And Kilmar, Abrego, Garcia, whether it's the standard or it's the anomaly, the process was violated in this specific way. It sounds like the Trump just came up with his own process to go through this and is just following that. When every single court that you've gone to, even up to the Supreme Court, has said that, yeah, you did not go through the proper procedure. Now, as far as like him bringing them back, that is up in the air as far as like what Trump can do. But the initial process was violated, and I think it's right to criticize him for not following the proper procedure. Any issue that pops up, you have to follow like what the laws are on the books in order to resolve that issue. When you start violating the laws because you start citing that the issue is just so big, what's to stop the Democrats from being in the office saying like, oh, guns are such a big issue that I'm going to start violating the laws on the books in order to fix the gun issue? Again, it's just like,
well, I just don't think that like the violation of the laws is actually been proven out, and again, like the Supreme Court hasn't actually ordered Trump to bring him back. So
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the Supreme
No,
Court
I'm
said
just
that he
saying
violated the due process that he had.
possibly, possibly, but again, these things are way more complex that I don't think that you can just concretely make the claim that he did violate the process in totality. Like he maybe didn't go through the process as cleanly as he should have, but there's still an argument that he did go through a process. He went through there's like again like there's multiple processes to this, so it's just not a clean. It's not going to be a clean argument because there's so many laws that you have to go through in order to prove whether he in totality like went against the process. I agree that there's some parts of the order, some parts of the process that he neglected or that he went over, but there's also arguments that there's other parts of the law that support what he did. And again, like the Supreme Court hasn't ordered him to bring him back, so I don't see any reason for him to bring back Kilmar Abrego, especially when it does seem like this case is an anomaly. And until this is happening on a mass scale, like I'm not really gonna.
But why wait for it on a mass scale? If one individual's rights are violated, shouldn't you resolve that? If someone is sent to jail unjustly,
in America as an American citizen,
but why
there's
that
avenues
distinction?
because there's avenues for an American citizen to go through that. There's avenues for them to do that. There's not many avenues for an illegal immigrant to come back to America and fight his case.
Would you agree that all laws that are within America, that we have those laws because they're grounded in some sort of moral basis for why we instantiate those laws?
Not all laws, but most of them.
But most laws, right?
Yeah.
So the legal area of it, admittedly it is gray from my point of view. It looks like the due process that Abrego should have had, that was violated. Trump admitted up to that initially, not him himself, but his lawyers, which he fired afterwards. But the lawyer said it was a mistake. Every court that has looked at this has agreed that Abrego should have gone through a certain process that was not followed. So to me, it's like whether the laws all point to it was violated, or there's like some crisscrossing of laws that makes it hard to say. I do think that like this distinction that we're making between he's not an American citizen, so I just don't care whether he goes through the process or not.
I don't care whether he comes back. I don't care whether he comes back to go through the process. Going forward for other illegal immigrants, yes. But I don't care that the Supreme Court hasn't ordered him to come back. I don't see any need for.
But why would you care that the process was violated, but you don't care that he comes back to fix that mistake?
Because I'm not trying to expend more American resources on bringing back an illegal immigrant to fight his case.
But if he was deported mistakenly, don't you think the US
he was imprisoned? He was deported to the wrong country mistakenly. He wasn't deported mistakenly. He was going to be deported either way.
I don't know. I don't even know if that's true. I'm just granting that for the sake of argument.
That's based on the Trump administration. If they bring him back, they're deporting him elsewhere. And wouldn't you agree the DOJ is a court? That's a court of law?
The Department of Justice?
Yes.
I don't think the DOJ is a court, no.
The Department of Justice is not a court.
The Department of Justice fights cases in court, but they don't have their own separate court.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, the Department of Justice can like bring cases against like whatever court you want to in order to fight a specific case, but they're not their own court of law, and thankfully they're not, because that's all within the executive branch. And I think that would be a huge violation of checks and balances between the executive, the judicial, and in this case, just the executive and the judicial. That's another thing. It's just like these checks and balances that we have to make sure that we check the power of both branches. It seems like that's just being violated in this specific way. Because Trump just basically just said, well, I'm just going to deport him anyway. Forget what the judiciary has to say about it. Judiciary finally catches up and says, like, no, you violated the process that we have in the books. And now Trump's like, well,
don't do it again.
Well, yeah, but he's already gone.
Don't do it again.
Yeah, but you should try to resolve a mistake that you make. You can't just say, well, don't do it again. No, that's not how it works. You don't send someone off to prison mistakenly, American citizen or not, and say, well, just don't do it again. No, you fix the issue that you made. You release the guy from prison. You bring him back. In this case, I think they should bring him back.
I think they should if the Supreme Court orders them to. The Supreme Court hasn't ordered them to, so I don't see why they need to.
If the Supreme Court orders them to, and Trump doesn't, what would you say to
that? Then that's wrong.
Because the Supreme Court.
Right.
Okay, so,
like especially when you're talking about these checks and balances, right? Like where the majority of the checks and balances occur is the three co-equal branches of government. It's the Supreme Court, the executive branch, and Congress. The lower courts, there's an argument to be had that the lower courts their authority doesn't supersede the executive branch, and especially not the Supreme Court. So it's really the Supreme Court is where that authority lies. So the lower courts can bring all these orders all they want, but their authority doesn't supersede the executive branch, and it definitely doesn't supersede the Supreme Court. So until the Supreme Court tells the executive branch to orders him back, then the point is moot, because it's the three co-equal branches of government, which is the Supreme Court, the executive branch, and Congress. So until the Supreme Court says so, fuck these lower courts. They don't have a say over the executive branch. The Supreme Court is supposed to fight those cases out. The lower courts can bring those cases, and then it goes through the process, it goes through the chain of command until it gets up to the Supreme Court, and it's already done so. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, you have to facilitate it, but the lower courts have to define what effectuate means, and they haven't done so. So until then, like, the point is moot.
Sure, but it sounds like you're not even really worried about it.
Worried about what?
Like, to me, it's like to me, it sounds like you're making two arguments. The one, and correct me if I'm wrong, the first argument you're making is that I don't want the United States to go through this entire process of bringing Abrego back for two reasons. One, that, well, I guess is all one reason, is that it's just a drain on your resources to bring him back when the expectation is that we're just going to deport him anyway. But the second argument that you're making is that, like, well, we don't know whether the United States needs to bring him back or not because we're waiting for the Supreme Court to rule on it. But to me, it's like, if you're waiting for the Supreme Court to say something about it,
which they already have.
Well, no, they're waiting for clarity on what the lower court's going to say about what does effectuate mean, because they are worried.
But that's what they said.
Yeah, because they did say they were worried about the lower court, basically, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, like, overreaching in terms of telling the executive branch what they can do as far as when it comes to like immigration policy and stuff like that. And it sounds like I didn't read the entire the court document, but basically it sounds like it's just all resting on like what exactly is the details of this deal that the United States has with El Salvador. So to me, it sounds like if you're waiting for it, are you like, is there no worry that like the United States actually did fuck up by deporting this guy?
Well, I don't think they fucked up by deporting him. They
Well,
like
deporting
what
him,
they
deporting him to El Salvador to be specific.
is. You said, is there a concern?
Yeah.
There's not, because it's his country of origin. So to me, it's just
But he's in
makes
jail
sense.
in his country of origin.
Okay, and that's the part I disagree with. But you said deport back to El Salvador.
But is him being in jail, does that not does not raise any like kind of moral outrage that this guy with no criminal record got sent to jail in a different country, one of the most harshest jails that are in the world with the CCOT. He's not there anymore, but he was there.
Okay, so he's not there anymore. He's what,
No,
in a
he's
different
not.
prison?
He's in a different prison, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much I can be concerned about. This doesn't concern me. Until the Supreme Court orders Trump to bring him back, until this is actually, there's more information that comes out on the legal proceedings and the legal process on both sides, and who, like, until it really just until the Supreme Court comes out and says that what Trump did was wrong, I'm not really concerned, because I don't really trust these lower judges. I think a lot of them are skewed to the left. There's been like a lot of evidence to support like the source backing of a lot of liberal judges, and I don't have a whole lot of faith in the lower court systems because of this skew that they seem to have to the left, or at least their huge bias against Trump.
Yeah, but I guess the only thing is that the Supreme Court agreed with the lower court's opinion that his due process rights were violated. The only thing that's in limbo right now is what to do about it.
Right.
But you don't really. But do you care about that, or
About
his due
them
process
not
rights being violated?
to an extent, yeah. I care about it going forward.
But not you just don't want it to happen again. But you don't. But with his specific case, don't you want to see that resolved if it was violated?
I think it is resolved.
It's not resolved. It's just like we can't do anything about it.
I mean, that's a resolution, is it not?
No, it's not. I don't think it's a resolution, especially when I personally think that Trump administration hasn't done anything to try to bring him back.
Yeah, but they haven't been ordered to.
I think you should. I think if you know that you violate someone's due process rights, it doesn't matter. You don't have to wait for an order to do it. You should just do it.
I mean, I don't know that they see it that way. I think they see that they made the mistake of sending him to the wrong country, but
I don't even think they see it in that way. Why?
They did. They admitted to that.
Well, he fired the lawyers who said that. So if he fires those lawyers, to me, it makes me think that Trump doesn't see it that way.
But the other members in his administration admitted that.
Who said that?
Like Pam Bondi, Marco Rubio, Stephen Miller maybe mentioned that. During the press conference where Bukele was present.
And when were the lawyers fired?
I didn't know they were, so I don't know when.
Oh, okay. Because to me, it's like if they said it beforehand and then you fire the lawyers who said it, and if that's the reason why they got fired, it seems like you're changing the administration changing their stance on whether they see it as a mistake or not. But again, like if let's say they do still see it a mistake, why wait for an order? Why wait for an order to bring him back? Just bring him back to give him his day in court. If you deport him ultimately, fine. But for one, just from a pragmatic reason, no one else is talking about the deportation stuff except for these cases where it seems like a procedure was improperly followed. It makes sense just to bring him back, just to say, okay, we're going to bring you back. You went through the court hearing. We are going to deport you anyway. Now you're deported. It just ceases all the complaints that are coming from the left. And for me on this one,
I don't think it ceases all the complaints, because they complain no matter what. So I just think that like the Trump administration doesn't see this as a way to cease the complaints, because the left and the media complain about everything Trump does, whether he does what they say or not.
I agree that like the media is gonna find a way to demonize Trump regardless of what he does. But again, like
So they're not going to do this to cease the complaints because it's not going to
but
cease
no,
the
but
complaints.
it's a thing. But it's like if there's one valid complaint, people are just gonna hold on to that one valid complaint. Trump has already
Yeah, if it's
Trump has
valid,
Trump
if it's
Trump
valid.
Trump has won twice, and Trump has won the presidency twice, and he lost narrowly a third time. So the media complaining about Trump being this bad person, obviously that's not a good strategy. But if Trump starts doing things that even like a moderate voter like me finds like, no, this is actually like a legitimate complaint. When you even let those go on, it's like, well, yeah, maybe the media complained about Trump doing all the shit. Maybe it is actually like valid for them to complain about it. So if from a pragmatic reason, if you already said it was a mistake, and now everyone is focused on this one story, I think the only other big deportation story besides him doing it in the first place was that gay barber who got deported. I haven't read up to his case, but it seems like people are saying that he was deported unethically as well. If you just resolve those issues, then there's nothing else for them to complain about besides the bullshit that they're going to focus on anyway. And we already know that strategy does not resonate in voters if they're just picking whatever to complain about. But once you start giving them stuff to actually complain about, then that shit starts sticking more. So to me, pragmatically, it just makes sense just to bring him back and give him a proper hearing, just so people don't overly focus on the story to just say that his entire deportation strategy is bad. Because now I'm feeling way more hesitant about Trump deporting all these people if I feel like he's
Yeah,
not even
but
doing the
you've
proper
been
vetting
hesitant
process.
about Trump. I mean, you call yourself a moderate, but you're pretty anti-Trump now.
Well, I think Trump has done a lot of fucked up shit, and I would actually throw this into the same bin. But would you say that I find anything to complain about Trump?
I would say that most of what you have to say about Trump now is criticisms. There's hardly any positives that you say about Trump.
Because Trump has been doing a lot of stuff. But even in this discussion, I
He's been
said
doing a
that.
lot of positive stuff too. So, and you never talk about that. So I find you to
Well,
be pretty anti-Trump. Yeah.
even in this discussion, I said that I'm generally fine with deporting illegal immigrants. Have I said that I'm not fine with that?
But
Yes.
have you given any praise to Trump following through on that promise? Like
Not if he's
there's this one case, but there's plenty of other cases where he's been deporting people like justifiably, and
yeah.
that's
But
never been mentioned.
have you heard me complain about him just deporting people just for the sake that he's just deporting people?
Well,
Like obviously,
I,
like
I'm not
in
I'm not
this.
saying you're not reasonable. I'm not saying you're Trump deranged and you're just gonna unreasonably complain about every single thing Trump does. I'm just saying there's not like a fair balance of like the praise and the criticism. It's all criticism. You
Well,
you
on
might
this.
not criticize everything, but you there's no like acknowledgement of the good that he's doing either. So I consider that to be pretty anti-Trump.
How is that anti? Okay, on the show, we talk about news stories, and Trump has been in the news. Trump has been in the news a lot. I know we've been a little background, but we've been trying to find ways to like talk about other things besides Trump. But Trump has been in the news a lot, and you would also say that Trump has been doing a lot of controversial stuff, regardless of how you feel about it. You would say that it's fair to criticize this specific deportation story. You would say that it's fair to criticize what he's been doing with the tariffs, and I
Yeah.
and obviously like so like if we're focusing on very controversial stories that has to do with Trump, and a lot of your praise of him is that he's basically doing the things that he got elected into office for. I didn't vote for Trump for those things. So obviously inherently like I am going to have some issues with stuff, but when you paint the vision what Trump's kind of doing, I overall do agree with the vision. Like when we talked about the
Oh,
tariffs,
okay.
yeah, when we talk
There's
about the tariffs, like I'm not against the idea of bringing manufacturing back to the United States. I'm not against the idea of deporting illegal immigrants if they're here illegally. But I think where the disagreement is here, and I am going to make a big deal out of it because I do think it's a big deal that if Trump is going to do these things, either one, at massive short term loss, like with the tariffs, or two, to doing it to even though he's undermining the laws that we have on the books, and he feels that he's justified because he was democratically elected. That's where I'm gonna have an issue with. I'm always gonna criticize Trump for the process that he follows. Even the election story, I'm fine with him saying like I think the election was stolen, so I'm gonna fight against that. I don't have an issue with him fighting that in courts, but it's when he tries to undermine the process that we already have in mind. That's always been my main criticism of Trump, and I think a lot of my criticism of him have been because of that, because he's just a guy that does not like to follow the process. I think a lot of people like him for that because they don't like the way the United States government is currently situated. And I would even agree that
I think it's also because of the Democrats have done a lot of undermining as well, but you don't hear about that as much because of, well, now, people are listening to more independent journalism, which is why you have more people in support of the Republicans and in support of MAGA, but like more historically, where the mainstream media had a stronghold on the narrative and were heavily skewed to the left. I mean, you don't hear as much about the undermining from the Democrats, but they've been doing just as much as their own undermining of the law as well. So it's like, it's I think people like for myself, for example, are not as critical of Trump for like the ways in which he might be undermining the process, because you've had quite a bit of that on the other side as well. So it's like trying to judge like how much of the process is being undermined for also like the purpose of what each side is trying to do. And so
I would say for so to like the what the Democrats did over the last like 10 or so years, I would say that the Democrats, I can't really, I mean, I think there are some instances where the Democrats did violate the law. I'm trying to think of a specific example. The one I can think of is probably like the what do you call it, when Biden tried to do that farmer executive order bill, whatever, where he tried to give aid to farmers based off of race.
yeah,
And then the eviction moratorium,
the student
as well.
loans, the
Student
student
loan
loans as
stuff too as
well.
well. So I mean, and so as far as like the law goes, like I had an issue. I had an issue with the eviction moratorium. To me, it made sense, but obviously there's a way and a process that you need to do that. And same thing with the student loan. I'm not sure how I feel about student loans, whether they should be forgiven or not. I think there's a good argument for both sides, but again, there is a process that you need to follow for that. But
And
I
the
would say,
Supreme Court ruled against that. And
yeah,
so
and I would say,
that's why I think what it comes down to is the goal of either side and what they're trying to do, because you find a lot of undermining on both sides. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's good, but it does happen on both sides. And on one side, you have the undermining of the process for what seems to be this like nefarious goal. Granted, that's I'm being biased in my critique of the Democrats, but um, it's like a lot of the things that they were doing in undermining the law and the procedures were for things that, in my opinion, didn't really go to the overall good of the American people. Whereas like what Trump is doing, and there's a strong case that he is undermining the law and the process, but it's going towards what the American people want, what the majority want, and what he promised that he would do. And so I think that's why I am focused on the ends, because the means have been totally subverted anyway.
yeah, but
It's not me supporting that it should be that way, which is why it's good that Trump gets pushback so that we do have these checks and balances. But that is why I'm focused on the goal.
So Biden got elected because his own constituents want him to do certain things. There's plenty of people on the left who do support the idea of student loan forgiveness. There are plenty of people on the left who did want more COVID relief compared to people on the right. So Biden did have his own sort of referendum as far as like what he was going to give to the people. So I mean, this idea that like Trump is doing what the American people want. I mean, Biden was doing what the American people want. It's just
I think I'm speaking about the immigration. The immigration.
Well, no, yeah. I'm just saying that Biden did those things because his voters wanted him to do those kind of things as well. It's not like every person in America supports Trump's deportations. Now.
No. Yeah. I'm speaking more to the immigration. How they let all these people in. They've supported all these illegal immigrants through with the taxpayer dollars. And I know there's a lot of people who aren't for the deportations, but I don't know that there's a lot of people, even of the Democratic base, that wanted all of this illegal immigration.
No, I would say that the illegal immigration, it was more of just like there was a loophole in our asylum laws, and there were people abusing that loophole with our asylum laws, and Biden wasn't actively in trying to close that loophole, because I do think there was like a dual like incentive there, where like you have the loophole and Biden has no incentive to close off those loopholes, because generally speaking, at that time the Democrats were under the impression that their voter base wanted to allow more people to come into the country through any means possible. Now, I wouldn't say that Biden was violating the law in that case. I would just say more that like Biden wasn't doing anything to close the loophole on the asylum laws themselves. So it's a little bit different.
I would say he was violating the law because, especially when you think about the Texas case and where the governor of Texas was asking for assistance with the border because of what they deemed as like an invasion, especially at that time where you saw videos of these like immigrants running over the border and even like assaulting some of the border patrol. And when the Texas government tried to because they weren't getting the assistance from the federal government, they were they were trying to protect their own border because they weren't getting assistance. And instead of Biden to assist them with what they were asking for help with, instead they stopped what the Texas government was doing through the Supreme Court, through their own authority on the border, to not enforce the laws of the border that Texas was asking them to enforce.
Yeah, I don't know if I call that a violation of the law, but I know what you mean. Like,
I mean, it's a violation of the sovereignty of Texas, and it's like it's the federal government's job to protect the border. And if you have a sovereign state asking you to do your job as deemed by the law, and you're not doing that through all these loopholes, I would say that's undermining the law.
No, I agree with you. I don't know if I would. I don't know if I'm going to take what Biden did on the border and what Trump's doing on the border. I just don't think the analogy holds. Like, we can both independently criticize what Biden did or what he didn't do with the border and what Trump's doing about deportations and the border itself. Because closing off the border, like, I don't really care. Like, he wants to close. He doesn't want to let people in. Like, I don't really care all that much. But it's like Biden not enforcing or like just letting
Texas
anyone.
People who have to deal with that. So it's
I agree with that.
Yeah, it's like the American people might want more illegal immigration, but it's Texans who have to deal with that. It's them who have to foot the bill in order to deal with that, in order to deal with all of the people that are in their community, to siphoning resources. And then as soon as Texas and Florida and all these border states want to send illegal immigrants to other cities and other states, now people want to bitch about it.
I agree with you, and I think that was actually like. I think that's the reason why immigration became such a big issue, because there were states that were disproportionately dealing with the border laws not being enforced. So when you make that other states' issues, it makes sense that it would become such a national issue, because now you have blue states dealing with the same things that the red states on the border were dealing with. So to me, I had no issue with Texas. I had no issue with Texas trying to do something about their own border and people coming across, because it makes sense to me that if you're taking an outsize of a problem, I think you do have a right to do something about that problem. Now, as far as
Biden stopped that process.
And as far as Biden going against that process, I do think that is worth criticizing Biden for. But again, I'm just not going to compare Biden not enforcing the law to Trump violating whatever law that's on the books in regards to this deportation. I guess
the argument could be that they both violated the law.
I don't know. I don't think in not enforcing law is violating the law. But again, like I think I still think that
they're both gray areas. That's why they're both gray areas.
I don't think they're great. I think they're both worth criticizing, and I do see your point as far as like you're saying that it's not fair that Trump is taking this outsized amount of criticism compared to Biden, at least at the respective times that they were happening at, which I don't even know if I agree with, because I mean, you would agree that one reason why Kamala being like a stand-in for Biden, why they lost the election, was because of their border strategy that they did for like 3.5 years.
Right.
Yeah. Well, but and another thing, I just want to go back to this. I think another reason that the Democrats are worth criticizing, not because they were violating. I mean, you can find cases where they were violating some sort of process, but I think Democrats get a lot of criticism because they were undermining not really American laws, but American culture. That all this wokeness that they embraced for the last 10 years, that it undermined a lot of like the liberal values that America was founded on, and was really only the Republicans who were like upholding a more standard kind of American culture. Because I think most Americans, or at least right now, don't agree with this culture of wokeness that's been going on.
And that's what I mean by the focus on the goals. I get what you mean by the means and like criticizing Trump, holding him to account. I don't disagree with that. My criticisms aren't as big as yours, again, because I'm focused on the goal. And I think the goal with whatever Biden was trying to do by letting in all these little illegal immigrants, which he wasn't even really running the administration, as now that we know that based on a lot of these Democratic like strategists and campaigners coming out and admitting this, who was really running the Biden administration, we don't really know. But what their goal was in letting in all these little illegal immigrants, I really don't know. But at the end of the day, they did undermine processes, and there's an argument there that they did violate their duty to protect the border, especially at the request of a border state that was ringing the bell on an invasion that was happening. And then not just not doing nothing, they directly went against Texas's ability to actually protect their own border. And so the goal there, I don't know, but it wasn't. I don't think it was a goal worth having. Why have all these illegal immigrants? I mean, maybe you could make if I'm being charitable to the Democrats, well, we needed workers. But again, they undermined the process for their own goal of filling in all these apparently empty spots of unemployment. And so this is the reason why I'm focused more on the goal in this specific case, because there hasn't been many other cases that are supporting this criticism within this specific case.
But it's not. I don't think it's worth even looking at other cases. This one case to me is enough for, at least for this one case, to be properly adjudicated. And it's just disgusting to me that Trump's not taking any steps to fix a mistake that his own administration said that they made this mistake. No, I don't think anyone is saying that Trump needs to stop all deportations because of this one mistake. I think the criticisms that Trump's not trying to resolve.
Democrats are.
What Democrats are saying that? The Democrats we listened to in the video said that they're fine with the deportations, but they just don't want to have due process thrown out.
Like the judge that just got arrested, who wouldn't let ICE pick up someone on a deportation order.
That story was crazy. Okay, so some Democrats are doing that.
Yes.
That judge does deserve to be arrested. If I read into that story, so I thought we were going to cover
crazy.
It. But to me, it was just like, yeah, like if ICE was there to arrest him, and the judge let him out, then yeah, that's obstruction of justice. That judge needs to get arrested. So to me, it was like, okay.
I think where our disagreement is, you have stronger criticisms on what Trump did. I don't have as strong as criticisms, but I definitely see the criticism. I'm not in disagreement with your criticism, even if I don't feel as strongly about it. But where our disagreement is what they should do about it. I don't think they should bring him back. You think they should. You think
Well,
it's immoral. I don't think it's immoral.
well,
You
my
think it's gross. I
criticism,
don't think it's gross.
well, my criticism in that is like, yeah, it's basically that. But I think my criticism, and I guess a worry that I have, is that I'm starting to hear rhetoric where it's like, oh, I'm okay. I'm okay with the means as long as the ends is fulfilled. And I mean, I'm using means and ends because there's that famous saying that like you should be focused. Like the a means to the ends has a negative connotation for
The
a
ends
reason.
don't justify the
The ends,
means.
yeah,
The ends don't justify the
the ends
means.
don't justify the means. Like, and I'm starting to hear rhetoric where it's like, no, the ends actually do justify the means because we have this massive problem and we're trying to resolve that. And I don't want to get bogged down in like in the length of time or the resources that are needed in order to properly adjudicate these cases. And to me, when I start hearing
I
rhetoric
don't.
like that, it's like it is very worrisome.
I don't think the ends justify the means. I don't know. I don't think that the claims that you're like again. I think there's more like I don't have all the information, all the knowledge to actually substantiate your claim. I don't think like I think there is a strong case that they did violate the due process, but I think there's other information that could come out that could support the opposite. And I don't think that the ends justify these means. I just think that going forward, I would hope that the means are done more in a more proper way. Um, but it's not to say that I'm not like again, I'm not saying the ends justify the means. I'm what I'm saying is the means have already been done. And I don't really care for them to bring this guy back. Like you say, it's pragmatic for them to bring it back in order to kind of quell the complaints. I think it's pragmatic for them to not bring him back because you're gonna have complaints from the other side saying, why would you bring back an illegal immigrant? And why would you spend more taxpayer resources to bring back an illegal immigrant? So I think there's a pragmatic argument to be had on both sides.
Yeah, but you think, well, I'm not, well, pragmatism aside, I just like, if you admit that you make a mistake, morally, you should try to
Yeah,
resolve that mistake.
no, no, not necessarily. I think morally you admit to the mistake. I think we saw a lot of the times we even now we see the Democrats don't even admit to their mistakes. So I think moral step number one, admit to the mistake. That's
Okay,
like
but then you
step
should
number
try to
one.
resolve the mistake. And again, like,
No, you should
this,
try to avoid making the mistake again in the future. There's different ways to go about it. You think the moral way is to go back and resolve it, even though that comes with its own qualms. Well, I think the moral is to not commit the mistake again. And I
so
find
if
it
I,
so
so
funny and interesting
if
that
I
people
stole
who don't
something,
believe in objective morality always like appeal to to morality. I actually find that interesting.
how's that interesting? Just because you don't believe
You
that,
don't believe in objective morality, so
but I
you
still
appealing to
believe in I
morality,
still believe in morality. What do you mean? Just because
but
I don't believe
it's
I don't just because I
but
don't believe
it's
in morality is
subjective.
inscribed in the universe
You
does not
believe
mean I don't.
subjective.
I
So
believe
it's subjective.
I believe
Your
on agreed
morality
upon.
compared to my
I believe on agreed upon morality. That's what I think.
right,
I don't think we're.
but this isn't agreed upon. So you're
Well, you
it's
agree?
just your
No,
own
no,
subjective
no, no.
idea of
Stop, stop, stop.
what is
Not
moral.
not this specific case. We're just talking about morally. If you make a mistake, what do you do when you make a mistake? Now we both
You
agree.
admit to the
You
mistake and
yeah.
you don't make the mistake again.
Okay, but what if the mistake is still happening? If I stole something from somebody, do I just say, "Oh yeah, I stole that, my bad," but I still have the thing? Like what? I don't give it back? Is that moral?
No, I mean you go to jail.
Well, yeah, I mean, you give the thing back, right?
If you can, I suppose.
If you
But this
can.
isn't stealing. But there's also the moral case
I'm
to be had
using
that this. So
you
what
can tell that
like
I'm using an
do
analogy, right? If you steal something from
right?
somebody
But I
and
don't think
you try,
I don't. I think it's hard to apply that in in
how
this
is it hard to
situation
how is it hard to apply?
because on a moral basis, he broke our laws and entered the country illegally.
Okay, no, we're focusing on the mistake that the U.S. government made. It's not like we're not even talking about what Kilmar did beforehand. The government already said they made the mistake of deporting him. We both agree on that. Now,
To El Salvador.
huh? Yeah, but they said it was a mistake. Do you agree with that or not?
Yes.
So you agree it was a mistake for him to be deported to El Salvador?
Yes.
Okay, then. So he is still in El Salvador in a prison. Now, regardless of the feasibility of correcting that mistake, that is up in the air. We both agree on that. Now, I don't believe that Trump has done all that he can to do so. I'm assuming that you think that he has done all that he can to bring him back. Would you agree with
No,
that?
I don't think so. No, I don't think he's done all he can.
Do you think he should?
No, I don't think this is a moral issue.
Why is this not a moral issue?
Because it's because my morality rests on like pretty much biblical principles and objective morality. So you would have to point to something within my framework of morality to say that this was wrong morally. It may have been wrong legally, it doesn't mean it was morally wrong, which is why I find the appeal to morality interesting.
So you're telling me that I would have to find you're not telling me that I need to find like a Bible verse to cite to say that this is wrong?
No, I mean I think you would okay, if based on like for example the Ten Commandments, what would you, I mean you might not know all 10 of them, but like you know a few of them, like what in the commandments could you point to say that this is a moral issue and it's clear, it's a clear moral issue?
I don't think I would point to a commandment whatsoever. But what I would say is that I'm gonna just look them up just in case there is something for me there. But what I would say is that due process, that is a constitutional right. You would say for American citizens, but that is a constitutional right. You would say that, right?
Yeah, yes, and due process is different depending on the person in the country.
No, I agree. No, I think I agree with that, but I'm not gonna argue on that point. Why do we have constitutional rights? They're not given from the government, right?
Depends on who you're asking.
I'm asking you.
That's a little tricky. I've been hearing different arguments in terms of like what are rights and if rights are actually real. But I mean, I would say that it is technically from the government because it's constitutional rights. It comes from the Constitution.
So you're saying that our constitutional rights are not God-given rights.
There are some inalienable rights, which is the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are inalienable rights based on the Declaration of Independence.
No, but where I'm not these are bills given from a government, which puts it back in the legal sense. I'm trying to get that out of there. Would you say that like our constitutional rights, whether you would say the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, whatever you want to cite, what I'm saying is that those laws are built upon the moral basis. Now, because this country was founded, because this country was founded by religious people, they made those determinations of rights because they felt that those rights were God-given. I'm asking you if you agree with that or not.
But they spoke to specific rights, and so I just agree that specific rights have been deemed inalienable by the founders, but not all constitutional rights because
would you say
those rights can be argued.
Would you say everything in the Bill of Rights?
Yes, I would say everything in the Bill of Rights. Well, based on the actual quote of the inalienable rights, from my understanding, it's from the Declaration of Independence, and it was specific to the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I don't know that the Bill of Rights were deemed inalienable because they weren't even in the Constitution to begin with. They were amendments. So they were added after the fact. So I wouldn't consider those to be what the founders deemed as inalienable rights, because as I said, I believe that was written out in the Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson, which was specific to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those were our inalienable rights.
Okay, let's just focus on that. Okay, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Wouldn't you say that in Kilmar's case that his right to liberty has been violated because he's in a prison in El Salvador?
No, I don't know that I would agree with that.
Why not? What's your hesitancy?
Well, okay, so the inalienable rights, I would be curious if the founders deem that to, I probably would say that they deem that to apply to all people, but your liberty rights can be taken away if you've broken the law.
Mm-hmm.
and he broke the law.
Okay, but now, would you say that the right to be free from like cruel and unusual punishment, would you say that's a inalienable right, or just a government
Constitutional right, the government given right.
So you have no moral qualms with someone like getting like a cruel and unusual punishment? Because I would say that putting someone in jail instead of just deporting them because they cross into a country illegally, I would say that's cruel and unusual.
Depends on if they were actually a gang member or not.
Even if they didn't commit a crime, if they're just in a gang, that they should go to jail.
Well, if that's what El Salvador is deemed for them to do,
Well,
to be in their own prison.
Now we're getting back into the legal. I'm trying to just keep it purely moral here.
Oh, okay.
So, like, yeah, if someone is in a gang and crosses, well, no, I'll just keep it to in the gang one because that's the last example you gave. If someone's just in a gang but they haven't committed any crimes, they just join a gang, should they go to jail for that?
I don't know, because I feel like by like the pure fact that you're in a gang, it's pretty. I mean, again, that's where the due process comes into play. But like, once you're in a gang, it's the safe assumption that you've done some pretty nefarious things.
No, I would say that is a safe assumption, but again, that's where the due process comes on in.
Right.
So I mean.
So I just don't see this as a moral. I don't see this as a moral issue because there's so much gray area, and it's all based on a legal framework. So you can make it moral. I don't think it's moral. I don't think it's black and white moral issue.
I'm not saying it's black and white either, but I do think it's a moral issue at the root of it.
I don't.
We're talking about due process. We're talking about due process for people that we don't deem as illegal citizens. If I think that due process, the process is probably going to be different depending on the specific person that you're talking about. But I do think that everyone has a right to some sort of process before they get sent to a jail. And that to me,
and he did have some sort of process. He just didn't have the process that you deem as being the proper process.
Yeah, because I think the process was improper. Yeah, okay. Caveat, I didn't know I had to give this, but yeah, if I think the process is improper, then I do think it's a moral violation. Kangaroo court is a process.
I think it's a legal violation. I don't really see how you can make the claim it's a moral violation.
I mean, I can make the claim as a moral violation if I use like an example, like if someone just accused someone of a crime and the process was just okay, you just ask 100 random people, should this guy go to jail or not? If the majority says yeah, he should go to jail, then he's in jail. I would say that's an immoral process. I'm not saying. But if there's evidence
to support that he was involved in a criminal gang, and the problem is just that evidence wasn't brought out in court. There's still some supporting evidence for his deportation to a prison. It just wasn't borne out in court.
Yeah, but there's evidence that he's in a gang. There's evidence that he's not in a gang too.
There's not evidence that he's not in a gang.
The fact that he doesn't have a criminal record, the fact that he himself says that he's not in a gang, I would say that's evidence. If we're gonna take that someone else says he's in a gang,
he couldn't provide any evidence that he wasn't in a gang.
In his bond hearing, he never went to court to prove whether he was in a gang or not after the fact.
Right, but he still didn't bring any proof that he wasn't in a gang. It's just hearsay.
And yeah, it is all.
So the strength of the evidence is on the Trump administration side.
I don't
even if it didn't go through the court process.
I don't even agree with that. But even if the strength is on his side, go through the process. And when you don't go through the process, I do think it's immoral. It's crazy to me that you're saying that you don't think
it's illegal. It's illegal. Well, what's your moral framework? What's your moral basis for that? You have none. It's all your whole moral basis is legality.
No, I believe that the laws on their books are based in
legality.
Are based in this American morality that I do acknowledge is based in some sort of Christian foundational root. I don't even disagree with Christian morality inherently. It's just a spiritual aspect I don't don't necessarily agree with. But I can still acknowledge the moral basis. I can still at least agree with the moral basis. I can at least frame my own moral framework around that basis as well. So just because I
It
don't
just
subscribe,
it doesn't have much weight when it's all based on, well, this is what I think is moral.
but we're living under this American system that we do agree with at least most of the laws. We agree with the Bill of Rights. We agree with the Constitution for the most part. I think we both agree with the amendment that says, like, hey, you have a right to a jury trial. You have a right to confront your accuser. We do agree with those, and we'd say that if those rights were violated, that it would be immoral. It just, to me, it seems like
I think we just disagree. We just disagree with how much of those rights apply, like how those rights apply. If they apply to people that are not citizens of the country, who have broken our laws, and then how much of that process are they owed? And that's where I'm not going to hang this up on morality, because it's to me it's not black and white. And so to me,
well, I'm not saying morality is black and white. I'm not saying that. I am saying,
yeah, so that's why I find it hard to make a moral claim about this.
A moral issue can be a morally gray issue. Like, there could be things of like, okay, this would make it morally
right,
bad.
but then you have some basis to point to. Now, outside of, like, there's a legal basis and there's a moral basis. Your moral basis is based on the legality, so that's why I find the moral argument to be interesting.
Because I do think that when laws are violated here in America, that is, I think what I'm saying is that laws in America, they're built off a moral basis. You can't. You could probably find an example of a law being independent of some sort of morality, but for the most part, I think there is a moral basis for the reason why we have laws on the books.
Yes. I mean, like you said, not all laws, but I think mostly the laws of the founding fathers, who were the most religious of America, and we've kind of moved away from that religiosity, and so I don't think that everything within the Constitution is based on has really a moral basis. It's just like this agreed upon morality, which, I mean, based on that, like, you were okay with slavery at the time that it was legal. And so that's where the objective, you would have, based on what you're saying,
no,
because you based your morality on
a slave. I would have been against it. What do you mean?
But no, not because you're black. Thank you.
I know what you mean.
It's because So the only reason why slavery was able to be fought and destroyed in America is because people, based on an objective morality, went against the agreed upon morality at the time, the agreed upon status quo, because based on the objective morality of the Bible, they said this is wrong. And so that's why I think
there were people that were pro-slavery that would have called themselves Christian back in that day. Are you saying that they weren't Christian?
Say that again?
People were pro-slavery that would have identified as Christian in those days.
Would have identified as Christian. But then when they have that argument with their Christian counterparts, they can look to the moral framework of the Bible and say, this is why it's wrong because of point A, B, and C, and then you have to have that argument. But when we're having this argument, you're not pointing to an objective morality. You're pointing to the legal framework.
The legal framework built off an agreed upon morality. Like, if you're trying to get me to admit that I don't believe in objective morality, then yeah, I don't believe in objective morality. But I still think we can have a
which is why the moral claim is interesting. So I just feel like it makes
things without believing in objective morality.
It just, to me, it's kind of meaningless, because we both can't point to a moral framework that we both agree upon in terms of morality and say, this is why this is immoral, this is why this is morally wrong. All we can do is point to the legal framework, which yes, has Christian roots, but it doesn't have Christian stems, it doesn't have Christian branches, it doesn't have Christian leaves. And so it's like, where like at the end of the day, you're pointing to this more of like a subjective subjectively agreed upon uh, legal framework that's based on some more mores of Christianity, but in modern day time, nah. Like we've become way more irreligious than the
That's why
founders
I'm
were.
appealing to your own sense of morality. Like,
Right,
that's
which
why I'm
just doesn't
appealing to you.
appeal to my sense of morality. It doesn't appeal to it because I can't think of anything in my own moral framework based on the Bible that would say, uh, like, this is absolutely immoral. Now, I could say this might be wrong based on the Constitution, based on
It's not just
legally not following the
okay. You mean
processes.
illegally? It's wrong. Okay,
Right.
but again, like,
So I just don't find the moral
the,
argument
but
to
what I
even
find
be worth
interesting,
having.
what I find interesting is that you're even saying things like due process is not necessarily in a human right.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I don't know the ins and outs of what is deemed as the proper due process for the person depending on their legal status. And like there's one thing, like you made the comparison to someone that steals. And again, like if Trump did this deliberately, that I don't know because there seems to be some argument that, well, they didn't know because the written order didn't claim it, and then there was the verbal order from the judge, and by that point it was too little, too
I
late,
mean, I
and
don't think
based on the
intentionality
deport.
matters in this case. If you accidentally steal something, I think you still should take the proper measures to rectify that issue.
I mean, that's fair, but like I do think intentionality matters in terms of what you do. Now, if you like, again, the reason why that analogy doesn't quite apply is because it's not about uh, returning, like Trump returning something that he stole. I think it's more important that he admits to what he did and that going forward, he doesn't do it again. Now, bringing someone back, that again brings up some other issues that wouldn't sit well with the people who, especially the people who are for what Trump is doing. I
Well,
wouldn't
that's
want him
why.
to bring him back. I
But
wouldn't
that's
want
why
him
I
to
use.
use our
That's why.
resources. We've already
But
used
that's
enough resources on on all of these illegal immigrants, including Kilmar Abrego. I don't really prefer to expend any more than
But
necessary.
that's why I use the stealing analogy because to me it's like it's not truly rectified unless you give it back or you do everything with your power to give back
And
the
to
thing that
me,
you've
it's
stolen.
not truly rectified. It's the way to rectify it is to not do it again.
That's not no, that's not rectifying it. That's just make sure you don't do it again. That's make sure you don't make another transgression.
Right. That's the resolution. That's the conclusion
It's
to
just
this.
not doing it again. That is okay. I mean, okay.
I mean, because stealing mistakenly is pretty hard to do. That's why I don't think that analogy quite applies. Like you would have to do something where someone like there was something someone did accidentally. There's not much that they could do about it, but
You
the
can
least
steal
they could
something
do is admit it.
accidentally. You can go to a grocery store right
It's
now, hold something in your
pretty hard
hand,
to do.
forget that it's in your hand, and then just walk out with it.
Right. And then what if it's like food and then you eat it and then you're like, oh shit, I didn't pay for it. What do you do?
You go back and pay for it.
Yeah, I suppose.
That would be rectifying it. Yeah, because you can't give back the thing because you already ate it, but you're taking steps in order to rectify it. Not just you don't just go in and say, "Hey, sorry, I actually took this thing and I ate it, my fault," and you just leave. Like, no. You offer the
Yeah, I
pay.
mean, but you also just don't do it again. Like,
Of course, yeah, you don't do it again. But again, that's not to me. That's not full resolution. You go back and you try to rectify that situation.
yeah, I just think it's a lot more gray in the situation. You're gonna spend like it's like I get the analogy, and I think that's much easier said than done. Someone could easily go back. I mean, someone could easily go back and pay for what they stole in like I think maybe a more realistic situation would be if you're on the road, you accidentally stole something, you're like 3 hours away. What are you gonna do? Go back and pay for it? No, he's all the way in another country. It's part of the decision is up to Bukele. So it's more than just, oh, Trump could just go into El Salvador, grab Kilmar Abrego, bring him back for his court case, and have him have his day in court. There's just a
Okay, so
lot more
what
hoops.
so what
There's
would
a
you
lot more hoops to jump through than just,
so
hey, just go back and pay for it.
So what would you say Trump should do to rectify this?
Wait for orders of the Supreme Court. Continue with the deportation, the mass deportations, and don't do it again.
Okay, so what if the court says to bring him back? What steps should
Then
Trump
bring him
take?
back. Then follow the Supreme Court orders because that's what the co-equal branches are meant for.
No, but okay, you're making it sound like that Trump is unable to do this thing without it being massively.
I'm not saying he's unable. I'm just saying there's no need to do it unless he's ordered.
No, I'm just saying you're saying that if he were to do that, I'm not focused on whether the court tells him to do it or not. We're just talking about what should Trump do to bring him back, regardless of like anybody telling.
I don't think he should bring him back. So
okay, so I mean that's literally just answering my question. If you think he made a mistake, why don't you think that he should not bring him back?
Because I think that he would have to expend. It would be a waste of resources. It would be a waste.
So to stop there, so what would be like? What would you? Okay, if Trump says like, let's say that Trump. I'm not saying it. I don't know if he's done this or not. Let's just say that Trump sends Bukele an email saying, "Hey, can you send that guy back?" That's not a massive waste of resources. Do you think he should do that?
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Okay.
It's just to make him make him look like it would be all political. It would be just, hey, look at I'm trying to do something, but it's like, does he really intend to bring him back? No, I don't think so, and I don't think he should. And I don't really care if he sends an email or not.
But your reasons are saying that it's going to be okay. You just don't. Okay, you don't think it was a mistake. Just say that then.
No, they made a mistake. I just don't really care.
Okay, we can leave it there. I think that's a crazy opinion, but we're just going to loop again. So whatever. What time is it? It's like 10:30.
10:30.
Okay, let's just call it.
All right, thank you guys for tuning in. There's no real conclusion to that one. Interesting conversation nonetheless. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's other cases that come out that bring this topic back up. So I'll be curious to see what we both have to say going forward.
We're definitely going to cover it. So stay tuned for that. If you found this one entertaining, you will be thoroughly entertained in future installments. We're thinking. Well, we'll talk about the next recording date. I was kind of thinking, let's do something Democrat based. I do think I'm getting tired of talking about Trump. So let's focus on the
Your
Democrats.
sound cut out.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, there you are.
Can you hear me? Yeah, let's do something. Yeah. Let's do something focused on the Democrats because I know you got plenty to complain about, and then I can find something to complain about. So that will be the next one. We'll find something to talk about with the Democrats, or if there's a big old news story, we'll focus on that. But stay tuned; you'll figure out what we're going to do. But until then,
I'm sure we can talk about the judges, the two judges that got arrested for situations revolving illegal immigration.
You mean the one that was? There was two of them. I thought it was just the one.
There's two. Nope, there's one guy outside of New Mexico, and a judge in New Mexico harboring an illegal immigrant, allegedly from Tren de Aragua.
And that's not the one that shoot him out the back door. That's a different one.
No, it's a different one. New Mexico. The one that shoot him out the back door, I believe, was Wisconsin.
Okay, I think it was. Okay, we can possibly talk about that, but yeah, stay tuned, and you guys will see what we focus on next. But until then, thanks for tuning in, and this was another installment of Sibling Rivalries. We may not always agree, but we'll have a thorough and, for the most part, cordial discussion.
All right, thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you later. And